Call the Village of Wolverine Lake Village Council meeting. Tough road. March 13th order. Please stand for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Well, at this point, before we have a roll call, I'd like to introduce our new village administrator, Mike Smith. And if you'd like to introduce your family.
They can stay back there, it's fine. That's my wife, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
My son, Andrew. My daughter, Natalie. And my mom, Alice.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It's a local affair, so thank you. Coming over here, or?
I think we're right in the middle.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, if you will raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully perform
and that I will faithfully perform
the duties of office of Administrator Clerk
the duties of the office of Administrator Clerk
in and for
in and for
the Village of Wolverine Lake,
the Village of Wolverine Lake,
County of Oakland,
County of Oakland,
State of Michigan,
State of Michigan,
according to the best of my abilities.
according to the best of my abilities.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'll maybe walk them,
Sure.
and I'll step in.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know if they want to come and say anything. Anyways, we'll thank you, and we'll of course be conversing more over
Sure.
time, so. We'll say thank you.
Okay.
Oh, that's it?
I guess that's it.
Until next month or tomorrow.
He's got good news supposedly for our future school. They go to Dublin, so we're excited for.
Yeah. Good construction.
What's that?
Is he going to attend the meeting?
Yeah, he said he was coming back
Yeah,
up.
he's gonna be
Yeah,
back
he's
over
walking them
showing
up.
the kids the,
The peanut gallery.
You guys will wait for a couple.
Sorry.
We'll wait for a couple seconds. You can tell there's kids in the village.
Are we waiting or are we gonna roll?
We'll wait for a couple seconds here. You should have it down. I think.
If he changed his mind and he's not coming back.
in and out.
Take a recess before we get going, I guess.
Those baseball fields, are they utilized both for handicap and for?
It can be an hour, depends upon the scheduling. There are 6 of them in the area, but
Is there a need for it in this area?
in this area,
Yeah.
closest one is Canton, Auburn. I think there's one in Southfield. I know it looks
I
like it
mean,
might be.
I was just curious if there's leagues
You
or
could probably do the rules.
in our area.
Yeah, we probably could.
Well, we don't have a miracle field, so at that point in time, there isn't a league yet. It's to be developed, and some conversations going on with some of the other leagues
Mike's gonna do good.
to see if any of the coaches want to foster.
Is this something we've done in the past, or is this brand
No.
new?
This is brand new. And this is really a shot.
Stir 'em up.
one I saw.
I looked them up on, online
On
today.
Lakes, yeah. This is in Lakes,
It's still a dirt field, isn't it?
no, it's not.
Oh,
It's a composite rubber-based field. That's what the $500 is to. That does nothing more than to put us on the radar, for them to get the site.
Yeah.
For them to
so this would be for like wheelchair and the whole.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
wheelchair, kids that,
Yeah, all
you know,
disabilities, really.
yeah. And what they've seen at these fields is adults coming in and using the fields also. You know, paraplegics, other people like that.
Here we go.
It'll be field one,
The one closest
Name
to
tag?
the,
closest to the overall
yeah,
plan.
first one when you come to
Too
it.
soon.
Yeah, and that's the one that's highest and driest that we've been walking. So. But that's up for Mr. Powell to make determinations on.
Did I do something wrong again?
Always. Now we're talking about the grade
Might as well
of
start.
the park.
He's coming out.
Some things are moving,
The first,
Park
the
and
first
Recs.
8 items don't take,
concession stand,
I
I got all the
understand.
prints and all of the rest. So.
Okay. I don't think there's been a total clerical.
In a while. Yeah. Well, because of where the ground is, you know, you just go down Benstein, you look in the playfield area and it's underwater.
Mike, do you think it would be easier to add dirt and give it a little crown or a French drain or just some dry salt?
It really needs to be pushed towards Benstein,
There he is.
and then the two culverts
Sit up there, next to
Yes, sir.
extend underneath the drive.
That's your spot.
in the audience.
That's your spot.
Yeah,
Get a neighbor again. Just deal with that in turn.
what's that?
So I get a neighbor again.
Are you
Okay.
gonna get a neighbor?
We have a name tag around here somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna stay out there, but it's fine.
Okay, well, we might as well continue here. Roll call.
Scott.
Here?
York.
Here.
Singlets.
Yes,
Pedro.
Yes,
Dumont.
Here.
Duff.
Yes.
Mel.
and we have noticed that Mr. Malik will not be here tonight. I
Make a
know he's
motion that we
ill.
excuse Malik.
Second. Motion by Duff, second by Dumont. Excuse Mr. Malik, any discussion? He did call me earlier too, so. He will be watching, he said, so. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We've got some I really don't have any correspondence, I don't believe.
no, sir.
As far as additions to business, we've got a gentleman here from the Walled Lake School Board, which would like to talk about a bond proposal, so I'd like to make that pre-business, or pre-13A. And then also,
Make him stay for the whole meeting.
Veterans Memorial Committee update from Mr. Scott, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll make that item M. I believe that's it. I don't think there's anything else. So with that, first call to the public. Anybody in the audience would like to speak on agenda items only? Seeing none, we'll go to the first call and move on to the consent agenda. So, anybody have like a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Duff, second by Dumont. Roll call vote, please.
York.
Yes.
Singlets.
Yes.
Pedro.
Yes.
Dumont.
Yes.
Duff.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
So moves us to public hearings, which we have none, and to pre-13, which would be Bill Chatfield from the Walled Lake School Board. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. My name's Bill Chatfield. I'm the Operations Director with the Walled Lake School District. And I am here tonight. I just wanted to share some information about the Walled Lake School's upcoming bond program, which we are titling the Building Infrastructure and Equity Bond. That election will be held on May 7th. Prior to giving you details of my congratulations to Mr. Smith, a former Walled Lake Schools Board of Education member. So nice to see your continued success. We are very proud of the collaboration we have always had with the Village of Wolverine Lake, and we just want to make sure that the council and the community are aware of the election and the purpose of the bond. We find ourselves in a position in Walled Lake Schools. We have an opportunity to change the face of our district in a significant fashion at no cost to the taxpayers. Due to increasing property values in all of the communities where their children attend Walled Lake Schools, new housing starts in those communities, and the refinancing of previous bonds, we have an opportunity to invest $316 million into our aging and crumbling school buildings at no additional cost to taxpayers. In fact, at a tax decrease. We have an opportunity to invest these valuable capital funds while still providing our community with a 0.4 mil tax decrease due to those factors I have just mentioned. So the program would include several major initiatives. One would be the major reconstruction of Western High School to bring it up to the educational standards of Central and Northern, Western being our oldest operating school in terms of its effective age. Rebuilding Dublin Elementary, the oldest school in our district, with an entirely new elementary school on the existing site, as well as providing a small early childhood center wing onto that school. We would construct a freestanding early childhood center within the community for the purpose of attracting and retaining students within the Walled Lake School community. We have done some studies, and we know that 57% of all preschool children in Walled Lake schools go to an alternative facility other than one provided by Walled Lake Schools, and we feel that's an important attraction. And we would make significant infrastructure, security, and program improvements at all of our other schools. We have some tremendous needs in roofs and parking lots and chillers and heating plants and windows and building envelopes and all of the things that deteriorate over a 20 and 30-year period in which we simply haven't had the funds to invest in them. So that's a major component. Our current school millage levy is 4.53 mils, and what that means for the owner of a $200,000 home with a $100,000 SEV, equalized value, and taxable rate means that that homeowner would pay $453 a year in school taxes. If this bond passes, that will actually drop to $413 on a $200,000 home. And it's important to note that bond monies cannot be used for operational expenses, benefits, salaries, so all of these funds would go directly into improving our schools. So this bond, it absolutely represents an opportunity for us to provide 21st century learning environments for our students while decreasing taxes. We all know that good schools increase property values in the community, and so we view this as a truly once in a lifetime opportunity. So we have prepared some folders with some informational documentation in them. We urge everybody to go to the Walled Lake Schools website. There's a link on there that takes you to all of the projects that are proposed, an informational video, a presentation that has some pictures of some renderings of what things might look like. We are asking each of our councils and boards. Walled Lake Schools actually has 9 different municipalities that feed into it. So we are asking each of them to consider supporting a resolution of which we provided a sample for you, whether it's this meeting or a future meeting. And We just urge everybody to just remember, improve your schools, lower your taxes, and be sure to vote on May the 7th, coming up soon. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I just, again, genuinely appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
Bill.
much.
Okay. Moving along, 13A1, recommendations from the Parks and Rec Board. Item 1, recommendation request that council approve purchase of snow cone machine, not to exceed $500.
So at our last Park and Rec meeting, we talked about getting a snow cone machine. And the snow cone machine would be used for things like Tuesdays in the park, the corn roast, and some pop-up events. Pop-up events meaning events with relatively short notice. The notice to be given through Facebook or email, a combination of those. And we could give out some snow cones and talk to the people in the village and not only give them snow cones, but also see how they feel about the parks and the way things are. $500 is be the cap. I think that the price of the snow cone machine is around $405-ish, something like that. I'm looking at my chair of the Park and Rec
That
Board.
includes like syrup and some nutrition supplies.
Yes. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of the snow cone machine not to exceed $500.
Motion by Dumont, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Scott. Any discussion?
Yeah, it seems like at so many of our events, we're always short volunteers. And I know we've bought other, like, we have a projector here for showing movies that's someplace in the building here, and I know that was quite costly, and that hasn't been used in years. There's a freezer out there. I guess if my concern is that we're getting all this equipment that people have to operate it, maintain it, and store it. On these events like this, was it ever considered to get like the ice cream man to come by and you could get ice cream from that? But what do we have now? We have a popcorn maker, we have a
The
Cotton candy
Park and
machine?
Rec Board members would like a snow cone machine.
well, we're in the discussion, my friend.
I
And that's
agree.
what I'm discussing. Do we need all this?
Well, technically, we don't need anything. But we would like a snow cone machine for the Park and Rec
Oh,
Board.
you also need volunteers to work all this and maintain all this.
I know, and I think that you could make some killer snow cones.
Well, you know, that's true, but it's funny, I haven't seen you at an event yet.
Yeah.
You don't come,
Okay.
so maybe it would be nice to see somebody from the council who represents the Park and Recreation to come out and work an event. One a year shouldn't be too
Let's
hard.
do it.
Huh? I'm at more events than you can even think of. Well. So moving on,
Can we call a vote?
How many, you mentioned a couple, 3, 4 events, right?
Yeah, actually, Mark, would you be willing to say a couple
I
things?
think you were
If
probably
it-
planning on like Tuesdays in the park, so that's like three a year at least,
Tuesday in the
right?
park would be the first 3, and that would, of course, then mean that we wouldn't be buying snacks otherwise, so that would offset those costs. Additionally, of course, would be at the corn roast, and at that point, at the corn roast, of course, we'd be able to sell them, so that would help to mitigate the cost of the snow cone machine over time. Additionally, the pop-up events, we're talking about 85-degree day, we know it's gonna be sunny out, let's get out there. We're also talking about working with Onwards and Upwards. If they wanna have use for it, when they're talking about their, when they do the monarch butterfly event, involves a lot of kids, and that way, they get their twig with the eventual butterfly, also give them a snow cone, and so we can talk to them more about getting volunteers. The great thing about this is every time I can engage people of the community, I can talk to them more about volunteering. The more they see me and members of my board, the more likely they're gonna be able to recognize my face and understand, yeah, there are people putting in a lot of time in this community. Maybe I can give you an hour, maybe I can give you a week or a day, maybe I want to join the board in the future. But it's not going to happen unless we can engage them. And this is another way to engage them beyond the meetings, which not a lot of people attend, any of our meetings, unless they've got issues. Or they attend big events, but at that time, they're enjoying themselves a little more. This is a way to create a little more intimacy, more contacts, more opportunities to talk to folks and talk about what we're doing in the community beyond just in Parks and Rec. If we've got other things that the village wants to talk about, we can distribute information that those things as well. Of course, everybody's then welcome, and we can talk about the improvements we want to do in the park as well and throughout the community. So it's a great opportunity for us that in the long run will pay for itself, and it's a little bit upfront for, I think, a lot of long-term benefit in many ways.
I know I spoke with Mr. Malik tonight, he called me and wanted to voice his opinion on it, and I told him I'd bring it up, and he said that he had done some calling around, and he said that it takes rental shops, you can get one for like $60 a day. Well, doing the math, if you're gonna use it like 4 or 5, 6 times a year, it almost pays for itself the first year, so that's my comment, I guess.
Does this machine, do you put a block of ice in there and then it makes,
You buy like bagged ice, you drop it in there, and this sucker will just annihilate it.
Yeah.
It's good, it's steel, it's not gonna break, it doesn't have the doors that might break off. So it's compact, it's less than 50 pounds, which means I can carry it wherever, because I'm gonna be stuck carrying it either way. So I like that. And it'll be easier to clean. That is one of the, we do use the cotton candy machine, we do use the popcorn machine, but those are a little bit more effort in cleaning, and they're a little more awkward to handle. And the cotton candy machine attracts bees in the summer, which is not ideal. This won't do that, so.
And it doesn't require any refrigeration either?
No, I mean,
No maintenance?
yeah, and ice is, we got 5 pounds left over ice. That's a loss we're willing to deal with, as opposed to leftover sugar, whatever, in a cotton candy machine. That is also a lot more work to clean.
My only question is, where will we store it and who will maintain it?
In regards to storing it, we have our facility here, we can store it in the back room. In regards to maintaining, are you?
Yeah, I mean, if
like-
it breaks or something
Oh,
goes wrong.
well, it does,
The Detroit Popcorn Company
Yeah.
offers repair service.
They do, okay,
so.
okay. So we wouldn't be relying on anybody here that would have to,
I'm not taking a technical course for it or anything like that.
all right.
Have to be certified, don't you?
Find a little kid, stick their hand in there kind of thing, no, none of that.
We have budgeted funds.
Well, in a miscellaneous, Mr. President, we do have budgeted funds in a miscellaneous account, so we could absorb that cost.
Yeah, I made sure to check with Mike first to make sure that we weren't going to be busting our budget in any way.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready for a vote, I guess.
Sounds like it.
Roll call vote?
Sinkwitz,
no.
Medrow,
Yes.
Dumont,
Yes.
Duff,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
York.
Yes.
Motion passes. Now can go get a snow cone machine. Next on the agenda is Parks and Rec request for council to release budgeted funds to up to $500 to join Miracle League.
Yes, so if I could, I'd like to have John Scott speak about this because he knows a lot about the Miracle League.
Well, let's hope I can live up to that. This is a non-color picture of what I do have a few Miracle Leagues look like while I'm walking around. So, a mic or not.
Looked it up.
It basically is a consortium of about 310 fields around the United States whose sole, well, I don't want to say sole purpose, that's a bad statement. Whose purpose is to serve children and adults with disabilities so that they can actively play the game of baseball. In Michigan, I believe there are 6 fields. I've only identified 3 that I know of. I think one is Canton, another one Auburn Hills, and another one in Southfield. Over time, what they've seen, and I first saw it in Lakes County, Florida, they probably had an overkill on what they've done because there were bleachers, dugouts, and then a large play field, which is somewhat akin to what we see with Scarlett's Park that is, as we all know, just about ready to move the dirt. They've been cutting timber over there. So I think it's a great adjunct to that. It is a great way to improve ball field number 1 in the park. It is a hard surface ball field. It can be used because it is the same size as the standard Little League field. So it could be used by other members of the community. It's a question of how that scheduling will go. The $500 is basically their requirement, and I'll let Mark speak to it a little bit more, because I did give you the thumb drive, right?
Yes.
But that's basically the study package. It gets us in the game of the Miracle Field organization. They will come, I guess, more in an oversight role and a communication role to make sure that over time we're able to put the field in and makes economic sense. And I think from a cost standpoint, I can't make a comment. I've heard that they can run anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, depending upon how much additional equipment you want to put into it. It's going to an engineering question. It's going to need, again, a very level surface. And I think from the standpoint of what it would do for our community, interlinked with Scarlett's Park, I think just another great thing for this community to take a look at and offer to its citizens. And yes, there'll be other citizens from other communities coming and playing. And the reason for the introduction now is because of the other items that Parks and Recs is about ready to do, which is to really get into phase 1 and get a lot of activity done in that park, including what you'll hear later, which is the Veterans Memorial. So I'm going to make a motion if it has been made. Did you make a motion?
You make the motion. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, to have the council approve expenditure of $500 to be sent to the Miracle League so we can begin the process of at least making a determination. And that includes demographics, how many people we might attract to it, I understand. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion by Scott, second by Dumont. Any other discussion?
Is it a one-time fee or is it an annual fee?
That's a one-time fee at this point, yeah. Sort of a study package, but it'll be annual after that.
This is an annual fee,
Yeah.
starting upon the day you sign up, and then it's a 1-year membership. The initial big parts are that they help you with leads, they provide you their donor lists, they provide you with their contractors and their people who give you preferred pricing, and know what they're doing, and they'll work with you and consult with you on not only the feasibility, but then the actual end product, and getting you to that point.
To help you with fund, I mean, as far as funding,
They will help to raise funds through their donor list and things of that nature,
Mhm.
and the ability to use their logo and things like that to gain more televised attention, journalism, general attention, things like that, and more recognition in the public to help raise the funds necessary to go the project.
Just so I'm clear, the $500 is basically going to tell us what we can do and how much it's going to cost?
Yeah, that's part of that, and then it's also just a broader, it's about, yeah, it'll help to give you this, to consult with them on their knowledge and their experience, and then consulting with all their current memberships. So like Southfield, for example, who's already got the field, what they took, what they required, and things of that nature. And helping to get you reduced pricing on surfacing and warranties as well. Giving tools, and yeah, project management, design, budget, drawings, and construction documents are all a part of being a member.
So basically, they're doing the legwork for us.
I think we got to do a lot of it, because in terms of the local section, but they do a lot of the, some of the heavier lifting in the broader sense, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just surprised because as much as I've been involved in sports, I know of fields, but I never heard of the Miracle League before. And do you know, is this
It's
something relatively?
18 years
new?
old.
It's what?
It's 18 years old.
18 years
old. Oh, okay.
Started in Georgia. I know I brought this up just last week with some family, and they said, yeah, they had some Eagle Scouts who helped put one together. So
Oh, good.
it is growing, and the whole philosophy is everybody deserves to play baseball. And this does have a broad appeal too, not just beyond working with little kids with disabilities, but also wounded warriors and anybody else with physical problems. It does help to raise the standard because it goes beyond ADA compliance, and which makes it also very attractive in an effort to attract grants and things of that nature
Yeah,
to help
it would be
support it.
nice if this came about, would be to get the local communities like Commerce and some of the other communities help so their people could be in the league too.
I definitely think that it would be critical to
Yeah.
engage the commerce, greater commerce area, I
Yeah,
guess you could
Novi,
say,
Wixom.
to, and get them involved, not only in participating in using the field, but obviously in the, hey, this can affect your kid too, and your kid's gonna be able to use it. It may not be in your direct city, but it's a 10-minute drive away. And that, I think that does have a great appeal, just as Scarlett's Park is gonna have for a lot of folks beyond just that local area. It definitely appealed to a lot of people because of the great thing it did for a lot of people who don't always have it so great.
Okay.
Call for the vote.
Sure. Roll call vote, please.
Medrow.
Yes.
Dumont.
Yes.
Duff.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
York.
Yes.
Sinkwitz.
Yes.
And the last was for budgeted funds for Easter Bunny Lunch, and that was on the consent agenda, so. Moving on to item B, which is adopting the ordinance 121A1, which dealt with,
This is adoption of your ordinance to change a section of your controlled substances regulation to align with the, to recognize that Michigan now has legalized recreational marijuana.
and that was the one we introduced last month.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
So moved.
motion to adopt from Duff, second.
Second.
Second by Dumont. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is to introduce ordinance 776A-4, which is watercraft ordinance update.
So I
Jennifer?
guess the one in your packet is not the corrected version that has the correct times on it so number 3 on page 2 should read.
It's different than what we have now, right?
Well-
No, this is going to be consistent with
Yeah.
what it is.
Oh, okay.
So- There's a
times are
discrepancy
incorrect.
between what's on your website and what the village has in place because of the regulations. It's supposed to be 7:30 PM to 11 AM, number 3, under
Yep.
47002A.
Because it says 6:30 in the one you
Yeah,
have here.
the
Okay,
one that's in your
why it's
packet.
confusing.
So
Okay.
there was one that was sent that was, the correct time was put on there, but that's what it will be.
But it's 7:30, okay.
11. So what this does is the Natural Resource and Environmental Protection Act, the marine safety provisions of that, those have been modified over the years, and they apply to Wolverine Lake, but the village ordinances haven't been updated to kind of correspond with those state provisions since 1991. So this just cleans all of that up. It's got the same local rules in it that it had before. We changed some of the violations to civil infractions for enforcement purposes, but really it was just kind of a cleanup ordinance. Make law enforcement job easier.
It decriminalizes a lot of the ones that shouldn't necessarily be criminal violations. Certain life jackets, certain equipment violations, they were all misdemeanors. They were all actual arrestable offenses. And we actually worked with the state of Michigan, the Chiefs Association worked with the state of Michigan a few years ago, and were able to make a little more common sense. A lot of those were civil infractions, changed to civil infractions. We are just now catching up to what the state did and the new Act 801. So it's a good thing, and yeah, there was a couple of things in it that we needed to make sure we adjusted, but yeah, they've been adjusted now, so.
Great, thank you.
So moved.
Motion by Duff.
It's an
Second.
introduction with
Yep.
those time changes that aren't in your packet.
Okay, so motion by Duff, second by
Me.
Mr. York to introduce. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just had one quick question, actually. And thanks, by the way, for coming to the water board meeting.
Oh, you're welcome.
We had one of our sessions and the public was there, I think, and pretty well forced. We had actually standing room. One of the questions raised was signage. Who enforces signage and buoys? Is it Oakland County that comes in? Is it the DEQ combinations?
It is the Department of Environmental Quality, the Law
Okay.
Enforcement Division, actually assigns where the buoys can be placed. The signage we do as a courtesy. They are actually, it's delineated out in our ordinances where the no-wake zones are. And so we have to follow that. Those have been approved under administrative rule years and years and years ago. And if you recall, we held a public hearing a few
Yeah.
years ago with Sergeant L. Bavarkis from the DNR. And we had 2 public hearings. 99% of the people wanted that no-wake buoy moved out. And it was up to him to say, okay, and he said no. They're the ones that make the rules, we have to follow them.
I understand.
As far as the signage, and we have talked about it, I know Andy Stone and I have talked about the entering some of the canals, where we're gonna put those signs. We've had kind of a difficult time deciding. I think we've come up with something, but the one that was there is actually no longer there. So we'll come up with something this spring to make sure we get that sign back out there. As far as the no wake buoys, those are deemed by property line, to corner of property line, by the DEQ, and those are approved.
A lot of questions that came up, among other questions. So, thought it'd be
Okay.
good for you to elaborate on it. Thank you, Chief.
So we've got a motion, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, last introduction of an ordinance 85-A11. This is dealing with the fireworks.
Yep, at the end of 2018, the Michigan Fireworks Safety Act was amended by the state of Michigan, and it allows local units of government to significantly reduce the number of days and hours that a person can ignite, discharge, or use consumer fireworks. Before, it was limited, the local unit could not regulate the use of fireworks between 8 a.m. and midnight on the day before, the day of, or the day after a list of certain national holidays. And now, those holidays are spelled out and a set number of hours is assigned to each holiday, and the local unit can limit the fireworks more closely with that, those regulations in place. The penalties for violations were increased from $500 to $1,000 by the state. So all of those changes have been made for the village for enforcement purposes.
Thank you for the clarification. There's quite a few hours you can still set off fireworks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least it's very clear when, though.
yeah.
Yep.
So motion to introduce,
So moved.
motion by Duff,
Second.
second by Newman. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, moving on to recycling.
Mr. President, for your consideration, I have supplied council with a one-pager here. Basically, the issue is that we were approached by our refuse hauler, GFL, an acronym for Green for Life. They do us, a lot of other municipalities in southeast Michigan. And basically what they're saying is that because the market for recyclable items has essentially collapsed, and because the recycled items stream itself has been compromised to such a degree that people are putting things in there that shouldn't be recycled, they're asking or telling us that unless we act to add an additional component to our the amount, that assessment that we put on tax bills every year, would be to the tune of $16 roughly per household, that the recyclable materials are going to go either to the landfill or to the city of Detroit, where they're taken to a facility, if you know the area of I-75 and I-94, there's an incinerator facility there, and these items would be burned and used to heat or supply heat to buildings in Detroit. So we need to make a decision, I think, as to whether, if we want to continue the recycling program. I don't think, or I don't perceive any sort of turnaround in the market for recyclables. To a large extent, our stuff was bought by China. That seems to have been the thing that kind of carried the whole market for years and years now. And so for a couple of different reasons, the compromised stream of recyclables, the fact that the market is no longer there, China's not buying anything, we now have this dilemma where, again, business as usual, we'll have a bump next year of 3% anyway, that's baked into our contract. But if we want to continue the recycling program as we know it, with the bins going to a materials recovery facility, then we're going to have to pass that charge along to our individual households. I presented this, I'm sorry, for discussion. I don't know that there's a resolution necessary at this point, and just hope that you can supply some guidance or ideas that I can take back to GFL, or, maybe be ready to make a decision here shortly as to how we want to proceed. I'd like to know, or we should know, if we're going to add something to the, build something into the rate next year. Budget time is coming up, and I'll be doing the figures for that, so within the next month or so, we probably want to make a decision.
And did I see somewhere in here that this was gonna be, I mean, if we move forward, or there was gonna be something through the rest of the budget year? Was there something about that, Mike?
Yeah, in that I've already figured the rate for the year ending June 30th. I think it's a little bit unfair that they, that rate is etched in stone. There's no way to recover it unless I want to, add it on to next year. But I think in good faith, well, I can probably negotiate with them and say, hey, look, we built up our rate. We assume this. You want to make changes, we can do that maybe effective next year, and not have their resort to that last alternative, which is landfill/Detroit, that they would continue to recycle at least through the end of our fiscal year.
Mr. President? We had talked about this earlier, and I tried to do a little bit of investigating with companies that I've done a lot of environmental work for. As he said, that the recycling, it's not financially sound anymore because the rates went down. The thing that concerns me is some communities have a truck where the guy throws the glass in one bin and pop bottles in this one and something over there. Our guys throw it all together. So what happens, it goes to the dump, and they have a big conveyor belt, and they have magnets to take out the metal, and people sorting stuff out. My concern is that if it was to recycle and actually recycle the product for $16, or like, what, $1.25 a month, I don't think anybody would say no. My concern is they're gonna collect the $16 and it's still gonna go in the landfill. And the whole idea of recycling is to keep those plastics and products that take hundreds of years or never decay out of a landfill. And what's happened now is they got smarter. A landfill, at the end of the day, working day, they have to cover 4 to 6 inches of dirt over whatever they worked on that day to keep the flying rats from coming in there, picking up the food or material and spreading disease. But if there's somebody working 24 hours, they don't have to do that anymore. So that's my biggest concern, is that if we pay the $16, which is, I don't think anybody would flinch on that for good use of recycling. But if they're gonna just say, well, we're going through all this work and nobody takes it anyway, so we're just gonna skip the whole get the $16 and put it in the landfill. That would be my only concern. If there's some way we have control on that.
We have a separate truck, so that truck truly does.
But it goes to the same dump.
Good, I guess. Because that's, we don't.
Do we know that, Mike?
Beck Road.
Are they guaranteed or given us any indication that?
No, and
Yeah,
I
they
think
dump
that,
under their
you kind of have to
responsibility.
rely on them telling us the truth. One thing that also compromises the recyclable stream, I think, is the fact that, remember back in the day, recycle bins used to have a separate compartment for metal, one for plastic, one for newsprint. And you're right, there are some communities that still, they don't do that, but the guy driving the recycle truck will sort the items, at the point where he's picking them up. Now, with our situation, yes, we have a separate truck, but the bins he picks it up, throws it in there,
Throws it in one bin.
crosses his fingers and hopes the glass doesn't break, and there are, compromising unrecyclable materials in there. So I don't know if that answers the question. It just, to what extent, who's responsible for compromising the stream of recyclables? Is it, is it the truck itself, or is it the fact that people are putting things in there that shouldn't be recycled? I think it's a situation where it's probably both, but, optimally, and you're right, there are other cities or other communities where they're still sorted at the point of pickup at the curbside.
Sounds like an upstream problem, really. And that question of what they bottle Coke in versus water. Whether they use product that's going to decompose over time. They do make plastics that do decompose, not
Well, they're going back to
tomorrow,
paper
but over
straws
time.
now, right?
Yeah, I've
Starting to
got
package
routine
food
drinks
differently at
and-
restaurants.
And I do, Mr. President, get the assurance from GFL that this facility, this incinerator, source separator place is, the technology is apparently much more improved than it was, say, a generation ago or 20 years ago.
Yep.
And that whatever effluent or whatever gas escapes the burning process is not environmentally,
Hazardous.
yeah.
I've actually worked down there, and that is true. The wastewater treatment plants and incinerators they can't legally operate if they don't meet standards, so.
You mean scrubbers and all
Scrubber,
the things?
precipitators, electronic precipitators and stuff, so. Well, I guess, I don't know if there's any other way we need to approach this. We had an admin meeting last Friday, and we talked possibly about maybe going out for an email blast to let residents know if, try to get a feel for if they might want to pony up for the 1632 a year.
I think it would be interesting to hear that commentary. By no means is it a scientific survey, and we should, by the time I present the budget to you, or we present that component of it in, say, late May, have had enough feedback to know what direction to go.
We do use Constant Contact or Survey Monkey or something, don't we?
We can use that. We discontinued our participation in that because it kind of went fallow. But I'm sure we can resuscitate that. Or we can just do something informal on using our email list of our peeps.
Well, that and the
And the
webpage,
Facebook.
Facebook page and stuff like that. I know
Good comments.
we're getting a lot more comments back from residents with that kind of social media than we have in the past, so.
I think it's good to get feedback from the residents.
Yeah, I personally like to get some
Sure.
feedback. Mr. Malik, through the chair again, spoke 5:30 this afternoon, and he voiced his opinion that he would like to offer up that the village include that portion of it. In other words, village ponies up for the 1632 a year, so.
Which is about, what, $2,200 or something a year?
I'm not clear on that. Does that mean not passing it through to
Correct.
end users? Or that
Yeah.
we would eat the cost of the 28,000 a
That's,
year?
I think that's what Bob was
Okay.
promoting, so. If that council's pleasure, I guess, I personally would like to get some feedback from
Yeah.
residents.
I think so.
I mean, I don't think we want to just go ahead and,
Do we need a motion for that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We'll just
We'll do
use,
it.
you said Facebook is a worthwhile
plenty
source
of
along with
back and
Facebook
forth on
page,
that.
and then we
Every-
could
our
probably,
emails.
so I'd like to send an email blast out to our email list anyways, and
Asking for comments or a
asking for
vote?
comments, or, yeah, either for or against, whether they would be willing to look at 16 additional dollars a year for recycling, to maintain recycling.
We can certainly do that, get that together really quick and have it out there. I'd leave it to you,
Do it.
Mr. President, for what that
Everybody on
requires.
board with that?
resolution.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that sounds great. Let's move forward in that fashion. Thank you for your
Yes, sir.
big update on that one. Moving along to item F, aerator equipment update.
Yeah, I just wanted the council to get a little update of what's going on aeration equipment. As you probably know, we've pulled the compressors. I should say the pond guys have pulled the compressors. They did indicate that for us to do the normal maintenance, and by the way, these compressors are newer at their own cost. They upgraded them from half horse to 3/4 horse. That would be, I think it was $540, Michael, $550 to do what they called
A piece, it was gonna be about $2,000.
about $2,000. The board decided to defer that, and I believe it's somewhere around mid-April that we will be receiving the equipment, and I think Andy has some area to store them for the interim. Just a little update on everything. We have had some feedback from people down at the boot of Penny Lake that they'd like to see them retained, that they've seen less algae over the time that those have been installed. That is not really possible under the current situation. Our permit goes through basically the end of May, so we could throw them in. But we would not be in compliance if we didn't do the next step they want. They be in the DEQ, which is to spend the necessary $14,000 to $16,000 to set up a testing bed of where the lake is right now, and then that has to be repeated 3 times over 5 years. The contest that has constantly gone on between us and the DEQ is you limited us to shallow. They're designed to do deep water. If we do what you require, will you give us deep water so we can do the comparison, or deep hole? And we could not get them to agree to that in writing. So rather than taking a risk, just to give, again, I've already done this once before, and I'd like to make sure we're all understand. We're still working with the DEQ on that question. We're also beginning to engage with 4 universities who have done studies. And we're going to see if we can get public funding, which we've approached the state on, to pay for the testing that the DEQ wants. And it's actually the Department of Fisheries that wants it done. And I was supposed to be down with the Wayne State University Biology Department to talk to the head, the PhD over there, and 3 other underlings to see what they would do to come out to the lake and integrate with other universities. We had to call that meeting off. So to make it short, we will have the compressors back. We've been assured that the equipment that's going to be in the water is not going to deteriorate. So moving it through a season, we do have the ability to watch what Duck Lake is going through. They just finished their installation. They spent $387,000 out of their own money. That is to say, riparian money put together an SAD to aerate their lake. So we'll be working with them. I've already talked with them, and in the meanwhile, we're going to keep pressing the DEQ. So aerators are coming home.
Are there any other ways we might be able to get the aerators to be placed down at the end of Penny Lake?
My argument with Andy, and so far we have been, I guess we're under agreement. We're dealing directly with the Southeast Divisional head, Andy Hartz, and his associate. There's been enough correspondence going back and forth. I guess my personally filed FOIA has stimulated that kind of direct relationship. We're arguing that they already wouldn't allow us to go to deep hole. So from the standpoint of doing the testing to continue, doesn't make any sense. Can we at least put the aerators back in at the foot? No answers. We're going to meet with them again, so
Okay.
we'll have an answer probably by mid-May, I would think, at this point in time.
If those aerators obviously aren't going to be working anymore, will the sediment of the zebra mussels have any effect on the heads?
Those that have been converted to copper, no.
Okay.
Those that are still in stainless steel, which we are still pressing. There were two things that were agreed to. They would take the compressors off, estimate what might be needed to reuse them and how much that rebuild would cost. They also agreed they really are in decent shape, so they don't need it. The other thing that was supposed to happen was every head was supposed to be lifted up, supposed to be photographed. We're to be told which ones and at what locations they were in need of repair. They still haven't done that. Hopefully when the ice is off, they're gonna fulfill their agreement, so.
Okay, is it something that we've already bought and paid for, and now we just gotta get them to do it?
No, we
Okay.
did pay for the reconstruction, I think, of 6
So we have a
heads.
little bit of leverage, I take it?
We have a little bit of leverage. There's not a whole lot of leverage.
Your contract
with
was up
them.
in December, right?
What's that?
I said the contract was up in December.
Contract was up in December, our permit's up in May. In other words, that why we have a window to continue the negotiation, so. Obviously, we don't want to leave the heads in and the lines in for the next 35 years. I mean, we're trying to take the leverage we have, Ed, and with the DEQ and the money spent, see what we can do to negotiate our way through it, so.
Okay.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Just speaking forward with that, one of the things it's nice to know that there is some possibility that you could reinvigorate this project then. Because in the forward thinking of that is we still have the electrical panels and circuits and
Yep.
things, so everything would have to be decommissioned at a certain time and not just forgotten about, otherwise it would be a
Yep.
liability to the village as well. So.
Good points, Andy. I think we discussed that with Nathan. I'm not sure, because this all came up, in February. Actually, it came up in October. I understand that there's a carry charge for those electrical meters of about $5.80 a month or something if we don't use them. I'm not sure. So those are all points that need to be handled, really. Thanks for,
Very good, sir.
yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next one is request from Constable Sinkwitz to attend the annual conference of Michigan Lake Stewardship, which used to be the Michigan Lakes and Streams Conference.
Mr. President, remove that from the agenda.
You're off.
When I got the information about what was going to be done, I thought it was going to be similar to what we went to, and this is nothing to do with what, when we went last year, Mr. Duff and his wife, was very educational. There was a lot of stuff on phragmites and weeds and aerators and all stuff. There's nothing in here that really has an immediate effect on the community, so
Okay,
we'll save a few $100.
yeah, sounds good. You're going on a cruise anyways, right?
Got to.
Okay, moving on to.
Oh, does that mean I get this money for it?
No,
I didn't think so.
Recommendation for Engineer Powell. Oh, Mike.
Hello, Council. I have a pretty full schedule here tonight, so in the next couple hours, we ought to be able to be finished. The first agenda item is the tri-party program, the annual tri-party program. And for those of you who are new, that is a program where the Oakland County Roads, or the Road Commission for Oakland County owned roadways, give the local communities the opportunity to pick and choose maybe improvements on their roadways. And so it's got to be fairly carefully done, because you don't necessarily want to give away village monies to improve roadways that they're responsible to improve anyway. So typically, we try to upgrade some areas when we participate with the Road Commission. So 1/3 of the overall project cost is paid for by the Oakland County government, 1/3 by the Road Commission, and 1/3 by the local community. This year, the staff has come up with some ideas for utilizing those funds. The first one, I think I presented at last month's meeting, is the upgrading of the signalization at Glengarry Road and Benstein Road. It's a $120,000 project. The Road Commission has allocated 1/4 of that to the village, because we have one road coming into 4 different directions, so that's a $30,000 project, of which our share would be $10,000 for that upgrade. And that upgrade is to allow for left-hand turn arrows in all 4 directions. I don't know how they would signal it yet. Do they allow one direction to go at a time, or do they allow 2 directions to go at a time? And I don't have control over that, and I don't know the issue to that. But that is one idea for the tri-party program, and the village share would be about $10,000 for that. The next concept, the next idea would be for the McCoy and Ladd Road intersection. The 2018-19 paving program here in the village is to repave Ladd Road, but we were going to stop short of that intersection. And that would be a shame, because that intersection, quite frankly, is worse than the rest of Ladd Road. We approached the road commission, and they said that they would participate in the repaving of the intersection of that roadway, since they own that intersection, so it would kind of enhance our paving program. It was my estimate that that paving would cost about $9,000, so the village share would be about $3,000 for the improvement of that intersection. The other, there are 2 other roads that we're going to be repaving, and so those approaches to the county roads can also be included in the tri-party program. The one is Apple Orchard Lane out off of Benstein Road, and the other one is Indiana off of South Commerce Road. Since we'd be looking to improve that intersection or that approach, everything in the road right-of-way can be attributed to the tri-party program. So each one of those intersections, I expect, will cost about $2,500 to rebuild those intersections. So $5,000 towards the tri-party program, of which the village share would be $1,700, which is great, because we'd be spending that $2,500 anyway. We wouldn't leave that approach unimproved and just come right up to it. So really, that's a little more of a no-brainer. The last item that has not yet been approved by the road commission, because we didn't really have a closer estimate on what it would cost, and that's the Benstein Road pathway from Clara Miller Park up to the Dairy Twist. The road commission said that that project would in fact comply with the requirements of the tri-party program, and now that we've bid that out, and we'll be going over those bids in a little bit, the village can in fact apply to the road commission to have the other governments pay for 2/3 of the cost of that pathway. And so we have the funds in the tri-party program to be able to do that. So that means our share would be in the range, and the numbers actually worked out pretty well, would be in the range of $10,000 instead of the village spending the entire $30,000 for that pathway. Mike Treasurer Conduct might have something more to say, but we're looking for council to discuss this and decide whether or not the village should participate in the tri-party fund program as presented, or some modification thereof.
Well, first of all, Mike, I think it's very commendable, and appreciate you going through all this effort to put these tri-party things together. We've used them in the past, and I mean, it's a no-brainer. And I don't know how much discussion we're gonna make, but I would like to make a motion that these 4 tri-party suggestions or agreements that Powell and Associates came up with, that we utilize them to their fullest extent.
I'd second that.
And motion by second by Duff. Discussion. I guess my question is, moving forward with this, that means we would have to move forward with the paving projects.
Yes, obviously, they reimburse the village, so when we end up with the expense, we invoice the road commission, and they send us the finances back. Correct.
Mike, just out of curiosity, for the pathway up, are we still planning to have an outside contractor prepare it, and then the pavers are gonna come in, or are they gonna do everything?
We have bids for having the pavers do everything. However, we believe that we can save the village money if we have a third party come in and do the prep work.
Like
So
we
we're
did
in-
on the,
Like we did on the other one, so we're negotiating to remove that prep work from the bigger contractors and let them just pave.
Good, thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Dumont.
Yes.
Duff.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
York.
Yes.
Sinkwitz.
Yes.
Medrow.
Yes. Next item is request for to pay DuBois Cooper $124,000 for 40 grinder pump stations and $58.38 for cables and control panels.
Yes, this is actually to replenish our supply of grinder pumps. The village residents have been very good in connecting to the sanitary sewer, especially if their septic system has failed. We're down to just 3 grinder pumps left in the village stock, and so this is very important that we have this supply and this inventory. They have been delivered to the Commerce Township wastewater treatment plants, and so therefore they are available for our use. That's 40 stations. There's 56 stations that come in a, 59 stations that come in a truckload. Commerce Township agreed to take 19 of them, and that leaves 40 for us, and we expect that that'll last us 2.5, 3 years, that supply. Along with that, we are asking, and we actually receive these supplies as well, 75-foot supply cables. Sometimes property owners need that grinder pump placed further away from their house than the standard 50-foot wires allow. So we have an opportunity, or we actually purchased 75-foot cable and 100-foot cable, 2 of each of those. And then the control panels, council's always wanted to have residents have the opportunity to put a grinder pump, a generator control in their panel. So this is a special receptacle in the control panel that allows people to hook their generator up to it if in fact we have a power outage. And that's an option that people can purchase, and it ends up being about $300 and some per panel, so that the individual can decide whether to or not. So bottom line is we have all of these items in stock, and these are to pay for the village's inventory for these products.
I make a motion that we purchase the 40 grinder pumps at $124,000 and the cables and control panels for an additional $5,838.
Second.
And that was just to pay, we've already purchased. So we're paying them, right?
Yep.
Correct.
I want to ask a question, but I think maybe you can answer. If you had a generator that that hooks up to your house, so if the power goes out, you flip this switch, a generator goes on, would that generator, would that automatically run the grinder pump too?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it depends upon how it's hooked up, but it operates the same, the demand of it is about the same as your well. So if you had a too small of a generator and they both went off at exactly the same time, it may bog that generator, but essentially a whole house generator would operate that as well.
I've got a 5,500 watt, it works.
Yeah, well, somebody asked me about that, and I said, I'm not an electrician, I don't know, but when I was looking through the minutes, I said, I'll find out.
So if you have the whole house generator that's automatic, you wouldn't need this extra?
No.
You wouldn't need a receptacle panel, correct?
That's correct.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Duff.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
York.
Yes.
Sinkwitz.
Yes.
Medrow.
Yes.
Dumont.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And last item is the road paving program.
This will be a little bit more complicated, and I want to apologize to council for not having this information in your packet. We actually advertised for the contractors to submit their bids on Wednesday of last week. That gives us enough time to analyze them and make our recommendation to council. At that bid opening, we only had 2 contractors bid, and they were both fairly high. And Mr. Condek and I decided that to research and try to find out why we only had 2 contractors bid on the village paving program. We found out that even though we personally invited each one of these 6 contractors, only two of the emails went through. The other contractors had their emails modified, and so therefore they didn't even know about it. Based upon that information, we opted to put the bid opening off for another couple days. So we opened the bids on Friday at 1 o'clock. And we're very glad we did, because the next two low bidders were in fact the new bidders. And we were very careful not to open the previous bids, because we didn't want the new contractors to have any idea what the original bids were. We held them. The contractors actually took those back and resubmitted them. But we saved the village over $100,000 by postponing the bid till Friday. That required us to delay the information in your packet a little bit. That being said, council also needs to be congratulated a little bit, because as you're aware, the 2018-19 road paving program was bid last fall as well. And the prices came in, the budget was $336,000, and the lowest bid came in last fall at $646,000, almost twice what the estimated budget was. And it was really expected, because the state of Michigan had thrown so much money into the paving program, into their paving program, that it pulled the labor and materials out of the local stream. So by postponing it, by rejecting all of those bids and bringing it back again this fall, we saved over 10% on the bidding process, which is fantastic. We also, under direction of council, we included the 2019 and 20 road program based upon the 5-year road maintenance project. We included that into the project as well, in hopes to solicit even better quotes from the contractors than we would have expected just 1 year. And the intent was to, by combining both last year and this year's, or I'm going to say next year's budget, because the 2019-2020 budget was going to be about $466,000 into the road paving program. By bringing that up now, the contractors gave us great prices, and we can now do the entire project as one large project, or we can allow half the project to be done prior to July 1, and the other half after July 1. And Treasurer Conduct can give you the guidance on that a little bit better than I can. But the overall bids came in higher than the budgeted amount, and therefore in my presentation in the March 13th letter, I gave council a couple opportunities to discuss how we might bring that bid amount back down into budget. If you combine the 2 years, we're at about $802,000 for the 2 years combined. And the intent then would be to not do any paving work next year. So we're combining last year's and this next year's together into one big project. So in order to bring it back into budget, I worked with the low bidder of the paving program, and we came up with a modification to the estimated scope of work. Instead of going through and removing 4 inches of existing asphalt, selectively remove 2 inches and not take out pavement where it is still in good shape. And do some selective milling and then resurfacing of all the roadways. If we do that, the roadways then come back into the budget of, what I have here, I think $760,000 if we use that option. The other option would be to remove a couple of the roadways from the scope of work. And I made recommendations in here as to which roadways we could take out. Apple Orchard, McIntosh, Avery Court, and Los Arboles. If we took those roads out of the paving program, we could also bring it back into the budget. Keep in mind that that budget was developed back in the spring of 2018, and we've had a lot of paving issues statewide since then, and so we expect the paving program to possibly need to be modified because the construction costs are going up substantially every time we go out for bids. That being said, Mr. Condek and I are looking for advice from council as to the scope of work and how council would like to proceed with the paving program for this year.
Mike, what were the roads that you had just, because I was reading something and looking at this, where you were talking about they weren't going to mill the whole road, just part of it, or a couple inches of it?
There are sections of all the roads that are still structurally sound.
Okay.
There are a number of roads that are broken up so badly that you can't save them, and you have to take all that pavement out and rebuild it. However, there are a number of roads where the edges have deteriorated, but the center's still in pretty good shape. And so we could mill out the sides of the roads, mill a little bit off the center of the roads, and replace just a portion or a 2-inch average instead of a 4-inch average over the whole roadways. So it would take a great deal more field evaluation as the miller's going through and the paver's going through, but it has a potential of saving a great deal of funds if we were to just tighten up the field work a little bit more than just
Yeah.
blanket taking everything out.
But we would probably lose longevity.
There's always a downside to not replacing everything. That is kind of a quid pro quo.
Do you have any numbers or guesses
verification.
from your experience? How much better is a road if we grind the whole thing down, put it together, compared to select grinding like you're talking about?
The roads in the village have typically lasted an extremely long time. 20, 25 years is what our life expectancy here. Most of the time, it's in the 15-year range.
When we grind them all the way down, or when we select grind?
When we grind them all the way down. My intent would not be to leave any unstable material still in place, but take out as much as we possibly need to in order to make sure the roads are substantially, are stable. Correct. It's an easy way to engineer, just take it all out and put it back in. Much harder to say, no, this is stable, and we can tell by the way the grinder goes over the top of it. Is it giving? Is it breaking up? And so it's much harder to do an engineering evaluation and efficiency.
Yeah, and two, when when the grinder goes down, he just goes down, grinds it up, they roll that in, that's more base.
Mhm.
So now you're putting 4 inches on top of it, so as you alluded to, you're getting a first-class road.
Right.
Where if some of the roads, we don't know how much base is underneath, and most of them that you've been involved with, have enough base.
Right.
But it's like anything else, if there's a crack or a problem in the pavement and you pave over it, the crack will come right back.
Reflects back up, that is correct.
But we also don't have as much commercial traffic as other roads do. That's a big portion of it too.
Are these, the roads that you're gonna do, are these like inside the village?
These are all village-owned subdivision streets.
Residential.
Correct.
Yeah, that would be,
Yeah, so you're loading, you're not loading it with like
Well-
semi-trucks and things like that, which,
now I thought frost laws were on.
They're on until the middle of
Well,
April.
the
correct.
guy over there on Oakview's had 15 or 20 cement trucks roll down the street.
I think Thursday morning, that's tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, the frost laws actually go on. So
Oh,
they were
okay.
they were pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, because I know my son told me it was Monday. But anyway, those are the things that, the only thing, a moving van, a garbage truck or something like that. Well, you're the engineer, and that's what we pay you the big bucks for.
If money were not an issue, I'd like to go in and just rebuild the roadways. I gave council the option because There's a substantial difference between what was budgeted over the last 5 years and what the bids came in at. And council's going to have some important decisions to make, because I expect with the state throwing $2.5 billion at the paving program, they're going to pull all the material and labor out of the local market, and we're going to have some issues to deal with in the future.
Well, I was gonna say that if we don't spend it this year.
Oh, it's all going up.
It's all gonna go up next year.
Yeah.
Petroleum's going up.
Yeah.
I hope council is comfortable with this, but I don't know if we need a motion, but I think, yes, I'll make a motion that as far as either repaving the whole road, cutting it up, or partially redoing it, that would be your expertise. You know the traffic flow on most of the roads. You've been doing this with us for what, close to 20 years?
I wish only 20 years.
Feels like 20. Anyway, that wherever you think we can be economical in the work that we do, I would like to see you take advantage of this and go ahead with this paving program.
Before there's a second, maybe Mr. Kondak should
Yeah,
give you
thanks.
some idea of some
Why not?
costs. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just a brief rehash of how financing for roads works here. We have a local road fund that, if it were flush and had enough money in it that we'd accumulated over the years, we wouldn't be continuing this discussion. However, the amount that we get from gas and weight tax, registration fees, et cetera, through what's called Act 51, favors the major road funds. Now, we're getting about 247,000 and change this year. We expect that. We're getting much less than that, in the less than half of that for the local street fund. The local street fund basically operates hand to mouth. We don't have any assets in there. The amount that we're getting, we're using for snow, we're using for road maintenance, those kinds of things. What I had, if we go back a year, the original plan called for about, I think it was 336 in year one. And so what I did was budget $100,000 from major to local, which is probably close to the maximum that we can do. If we do more than 50%, red flags go off, bells and things happen at the state level. And trust me, I do have to report to them every year. And if I'm not in compliance, they can withhold funds, and it's a lot of trouble for everybody. So I don't want to tempt fate. So I went into the year, it was with $100,000 that would go from major to local, and an additional 230-some thousand that would go from general to local. That would take care of the 336. Now, remember, this is a year ago, and we didn't have the meeting, I don't think, at that point, where we were thinking about doubling down 2 years' worth into our fiscal 2019. With that being said, let's say, for example, that the number is 790,000 for the sake of discussion. That doesn't change the amount I have to use in major. It still remains right around $100,000. So to the extent that there's any shortfall there, that's all general fund money. That is a huge hit. Not that we can't afford it, but it's not what we anticipated. What gives me pause is the fact that, and when we're looking at the world in 2018 and not anticipating the circumstances that we find ourselves in, both with contractors going elsewhere and prices going up and that sort of thing, it tells me that and remember too, the backdrop to all of this is we were conscious of dropping our fund balance. Where it's 2.7 million now, at the end of this road construction thing, after 5 years, we expect it to be about $1.5 million, which was roughly half of what it's like 50% of your expenditure base, more than healthy as far as any auditor or accountant is concerned. Remember, they still have that magic number of 25% in there. This just takes it down pretty dramatically from about 2.7 to, probably 600,000. Yeah, and if we're going to do it all this year, I'm not saying that necessarily means that the accountant's going to go nuts, our CPA, or the state, or anybody. We can absorb it, we can do it. But what I'm worried about is future. We've made sort of not a promise really, but with our road plan being what it is, it now becomes a matter of us being woefully short if we wanted to continue years 3, 4, and 5. Whether that's fair or not, I mean, to me, it raises equity considerations. Hey, you got your road taken care of. You're not going to, based on the fact that, you know, circumstances changed, the cost went up and so forth. We can elongate the project. We can, you know, put it out for more years, and that would, I think, take care of things. But again, it's a function of what are those costs going to be, and what are they going to, what's it going to take for us to actually, you notice that next year, even though we're taking a breather, the year after that is pretty heavy duty. We've got a big number of roads to finish and a number, number of roads to treat. So, I don't know.
Mr. President, just to clarify, my motion was not to do all this paving. My motion was to direct Mr. Powell that during construction, wherever he can find ways to
Minimize
the cost and save, and still get a good product out, to go ahead, but I wasn't ready to.
Well, how different is it going to be from 790,000? That's, to me, that's the $1 million, well, the $790,000 question. Bless you.
Well, we probably won't know until
Well, that's just
a study is done or we get into the project, but you know there's streets that you think you can do it on, so.
Mike, how long are these bids good for?
It's a great question. Probably for the next 30 days. I've asked them to hold them for 30 days. They would like to take advantage of being flexible and starting the project as early as possible and allowing the village to, allowing their crew to fit in and out of their schedule on other projects. And so that's, ASI works with the village extremely well. And that's one of the reasons we receive some pretty good rates from them, because they know the village is very flexible and we work with them. They can and they would delay a portion of it after July 1. That would not be an issue. That was the plan all along. What I didn't know was whether or not it made any difference financially, and Mike's the expert of that, whether any difference financially if we waited until after July 1, or whether move those funds up now and then just didn't have any road construction after July 1. So it's a matter of shifting it from one year to the next and not having any the next year, and I don't know the implications of that.
Well, we get another set of state shared revenue, right, for the road funds?
Well, that's
in
true.
the next budget year?
But really, you're only looking at a revenue stream that we can use to support the local road fund of $100 and some thousand a year. You know, short of the 45-cent per gallon gas tax going into effect, in which case, you know, we'll be flush and everything will be fine. But I think my point is that we do it this year, we do it next year. I mean, that part of it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's if I thought you bid this, or I think we bid this with the understanding or the idea that they're going to go, you know, at it full tilt and be done with everything by June 30th, so that they can do other things and not have to worry about our stuff after July 1st.
They would allow us to modify that. They're flexible enough to do that for us, Michael, if that helps.
Well, I think the bottom line is that after 2020, we're going to be in the same position, fund balance wise, as we are were we to take care of everything in this current fiscal year. So it's just a matter of how comfortable we feel accelerating the payment. And as I say, it's going to be. And one other thing I wanted to mention, I think we're getting off the ground as far as being able to do some actionable things with our park plan, whether that involves new equipment. Any grants that we're going to get are going to require probably contributions from our part, in-kind contributions. We're going to be matching dollars. And if that starts to get, you know, really go off the ground, and everyone, I mean, I anticipate that it will, there'll be some other demands on general fund resources. So with that as a backdrop, I guess, if we can defer it over a couple of years, I mean, it keeps our balance sheet. It doesn't, again, nothing is going to trigger any alarm bells just because our fund balance is so healthy, but it might look a little bit better if we were to defer some of the costs until next year. But again, if it's at the cost of higher prices or, you know, something, unanticipated, it doesn't really matter, I think is what I'm saying. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that's clear, I think. Mike, just to clarify, just so I understand, while this mic up, in the conversation with Ed, you don't have a definitive number in terms of what it would be to a full grind and a full replacement and what it would be to do selective grinding yet. Is that what I was hearing in the conversation?
I do, in that the estimate that I provided you is pretty darn accurate.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's the...
If we make the changes and selectively repair the roadways, $790,000 versus the bid price of $1,098,000.
Okay.
So that's a substantial difference. What I do want to stress to the council is if we delay this work until 2020, and it's confusing to people because our fiscal year is midway, but if we wait until spring of 2020 next year, you won't be able to do the same amount even close to what we're doing now. We're taking advantage of a 10% below what they even gave us last fall. And so whether it's done part of it done pre-2000, July 1 or post-2000, July 1, that's where Mike and I struggle in knowing how to work that. The next hit, however, is substantial. In the following year, 2021, that is a huge issue, and I think Mike and I both agree that we have to rethink that and maybe spread that big cost out further than just an all-in-one year.
I agree with Mr. Powell. I think it's incumbent to completely redo that forecast of what we were going to spend. Obviously, we're going to have to elongate it. We're going to have to push it out into the future. But with the new prices that are apparently going to be the way of the world, as opposed to what we knew to be the way of the world in March of 2018, that to me goes hand in hand with whatever we're going to do right now.
Well, if we do split the project, still keep it this calendar year, right? I mean, essentially, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Knowing that we haven't done anything this fiscal year, previous fiscal year, or current fiscal year, I guess. So we do have the funding. We've got essentially the $100,000 that we will be taking from this year's budget. And then we'd have roughly another $100,000 for next year's budget. So if we, let's say we did take and do the whole project like we're talking about, we essentially would have 2 budget years worth of major road funds to be able to shift, correct? Essentially $200,000.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to shift it to the local road fund anyway. We've been doing it on an annual basis since.
Right, but what I'm saying is if we spend it all this year, we'd have essentially 1,000 or 100,000. If we split it up, we would be able to utilize the other next 100,000 from the next budget season. So it would save us essentially 100,000 in general fund money on this project. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I
I
understand
guess
the
he
thought
told
behind
you.
it.
You're close.
I understand the thought behind it, and I realize where you're coming from. One thing I should mention, or I should have mentioned, is that once money leaves the general fund and goes into either major or local, it's not coming back. It's just against the rules. We can't do it no matter what law. And regardless, we're going to put the $100,000 into next year's budget anyway. So again, I'm still at the point where it really technically doesn't matter, but your point is well taken. It simply, it looks a little better should we, move the process across fiscal year.
A portion of the process.
Mr. President, I had a motion on the floor that if we can get a
I'd second
second,
that.
That was
to
a
have
motion
Mr. Powell
Second by Duff to, how do we phrase that now?
Utilize methods to
Utilize-
save money.
yeah, the partial grinding method on the roads, only where they're needed.
Okay, and any other discussion on that side? John?
I'm going to make a dangerous leap into colored graphical displays.
Yes.
I see coming out of 2019-20, we're at 466, and I know we're discussing different numbers. And then we have a double coming into 2020-21. Are we dealing with roads that are in more deteriorated shape because of that timing? And then, I mean, we jumped to 2021-22, and then we're down to 158. I mean, what, looking at this, and as I said, that's a dangerous leap. If in fact 2020-21 is in green and 18-19 is in yellow and red, it looks like there is actually more road being covered in these years at a somewhat more substantial or a savings. So I would assume that coming in 2 years, we might be back to this selective grinding approach again. Is that what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
that's correct, certainly, and there are a number of roads that were all replaced about the same time, 25 years ago.
Okay.
And so the 2020, 2021, we're looking for that amount of roads to really need it, but that doesn't mean that those can't be spread out a couple more years as well. So I think next year, even if we do everything this year, it's going to be very critical that we look about the budgeting from here forward after this project.
And does that sort of complete this program of road restructuring and rebuilding, so as we go into 22, 23, we can all just forget about this for a while?
All of the roads are going to be within about 10 years old,
Okay.
and so that puts us off for another 10, 15 years before we have to initiate it again.
Yeah, I thought I just wanted that to be
Correct.
said. So-
Correct. That certainly assumes that we maintain the crack sealing program.
Of course.
That would certainly help. And I also want to point out that this program, I did add into it some repairs on Wolverine Drive. There's some sections of that roadway that it started out small and they're alligatoring out, and so I've included some efficiency in while the contractor's over in that area repairing some areas on Wolverine Drive that were not included in the original colored drawing as well.
Yeah, you did the same thing on McCoy there. There's a couple spots that had given away and nipped it in the bud, and that's held up real well through the winter.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
And actually, I mean, the tri-party funds come into play if we don't do the McCoy intersection, correct?
That's correct.
Well, we can vote on the first motion, I guess.
Yep.
And then we can- So roll call vote, I guess.
There's no money involved.
Yeah. Yeah, there actually would be, but we'll roll call it. Okay.
Scott?
Yes.
York?
Yes.
Sinkwitz?
Yes.
Pedro?
Yes.
Dumas?
Yes.
Duff?
Yes.
Allen?
Okay. Moving forward from there, then I guess, go ahead, Ed.
Well, the next question is, how much money do we have and how much can we do? And I agree that this construction year coming up, whatever we can get, we should get. Because with all the work if it comes true, in fact, I understand that the asphalt companies are having a heck of a time finding laborers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think we get a good deal, as Mike pointed out, that they get a job going and then their job is going real good over there.
You
They
got
said,
the
well, here,
people on,
run
yeah.
over to Wolverine Lake and get that one road. And then, you know, it's very beneficial to us to have that option.
I kind of like the idea of at least splitting it up some degree. I mean, getting it all done.
I would leave that
This
totally up to
summer,
our
this
treasurer,
summer,
however he
yeah.
thinks is the best way to do it. I agree, because I'm not sure.
Well, essentially, you were talking, Mike, about if we let the contract, it would be, we could split it up.
We could split it up, and I would
It
sit
would
down.
defer a portion,
Correct.
maybe on the south side or something, till later.
If there's a reason to do that, the contractor would be willing to do that. They did that for us a couple years ago.
Mhm. And I guess it's under Mike's comments as far as, you're saying it wasn't really matter. Doesn't really matter a whole lot.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's just a matter of crowding the expense into this fiscal year as opposed to next fiscal year. We're going to end up in the same place at the end of fiscal 2020.
Well, council's pleasure, I guess.
Well, I was going to suggest maybe leaving it to, we're going to have to do a budget amendment anyway, based on what I told you about where I thought we were in April of 2018, where we were just going to do the 1 year's worth. So between Mike and I'm sure we can figure this out, and we'll have good numbers for you in fairly
Next
short
month?
order.
Yes, and if anything goes wrong, we have Michael to blame. So,
Right.
that's exactly right.
That sounds fair.
Are we on any kind of a time crunch?
We are not, and that's
Okay, so
one advantage
that's-
we have. That's correct.
Well, if we could get numbers, maybe a little bit clearer numbers together for next month then.
That's a little tricky because as you mill, I can see what's going on the surface,
Right.
but as you mill, you kind of have to be standing there saying, okay, you don't have to take as much out here. Nope, you need to take a little bit more out here. And so, although I can walk and give it my best judgment,
By
that's
you,
kind of.
you mean you literally?
By
You'll be
literally
standing there,
me
up,
or someone
down.
from my staff literally saying, no, this area has to come out, that area can stay. So it's a hands-on type operation, that's correct. You don't want to leave it to the contractor because this is a unit-price contract. They just as soon take every bit of pavement out and put twice as much back in because that's the way our contract is written. So we have to be very tightly control what they do on every step. I do want to mention that DPW has agreed and stepped up to reduce some of the costs, as you saw in my letter. They can replace some culverts and take down the trees and things like that to take it out of this project, which will help as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll wait until next month.
Sounds like that's what we should do, right?
Wait for next month. Actually, the contractor's looking to hopefully have a contract signed here before next month, so he
That's
can,
what I was-
so that he can schedule his work.
That's what I thought.
Otherwise,
So you
if
need a
he
motion.
doesn't know that he's gonna get the job, that there's no discussion, no scheduling work then.
I would think council would be comfortable with the engineer and the treasurer working something out, and then maybe, I don't know.
Well, I think you're
Administrative-
looking for a motion not to exceed, is that what you're looking for?
That would be more than satisfactory.
Yeah, and subject to what you've just said, basically, Mike and Mr. Powell making sure it's not exceeded, I guess that's where we're going
Right.
with this, right?
Yeah, right now, there's so many variables.
Because I gave you the options because I absolutely knew that we didn't have $1,098,000 to spend. And so I really wanted you to know that the treasurer and I have looked at it and can work those down to save some money and bring it back into the
So
same
the number
budget
you're
that we
looking
had
for is-
last spring.
Let me ask you, if we make a motion tonight and the number is greater than what we can afford, can we always cut back on that? Or are we committed?
It's a unit price bid, right?
It's a unit price bid, so Mike, the treasurer and I can stop construction at any point, and we'll keep a running tally and saying, okay, we're
can't do
approaching
this road
this.
today.
We can't do this road until next year, something like that.
Because that's basically what we did when we were going between the island and the Benstein, where I came up with the idea, don't do them both, just do the island, get
Right.
that done for the winter, and then come back to it.
That is correct.
So what's,
So
what's the number that we gotta
So
squeeze out here?
800.
Like at nine.
You want to use the 790?
The 790 is a number that I feel fairly
So
comfortable.
I would like to make a motion that we give
What's
purview
$795?
to Engineer Powell and our treasurer Mike Condit. Basically, not to exceed, what was it, $790,000
$790,500.
to secure the paving project.
So you're looking for 791 is what you're.
791.
791.
Yeah, thank you.
Second.
Okay, motion by Duff, second by Sikowitz. Any other discussion? Roll call.
York.
Yes.
Sinkwitz.
Yes.
Pedro.
Yes.
Clement.
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Thank you, council. I'm sorry for taking so much time, but obviously fairly critical.
Thank you.
Takes a lot of discussion to burn up $790,000.
Unless you're Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Len is by the second.
Burned out the calculator.
Okay. Recommendations from interim administrator, treasurer conduct.
Mr. President, number one is the purchase of a new furnace in the middle bay of the DPW building. This, unlike what is stated in the agenda item itself, was in fact budgeted in this fiscal year. At
It
to the
was
tune
what?
of $8,000. By way of background, Mr. Stone got a couple of proposals, one from Matheson, one from Family Heating and Cooling. He feels very comfortable with Matheson, both based on track record. They've done a lot of stuff for us before, air conditioner installations and so forth. So the recommendation is to simply proceed with the purchase of the new furnace from Matheson. They're doing a lot more for us too. The warranty is better, to the tune of $4,297. Well
I'll
within
make
the
that-
budget for.
I'll make
this
that
particular-
motion.
Well, second. Andy, what's the age on that furnace that's up there currently?
Current furnace, probably, it's 30 years
30 years?
old, and I think it's probably due to be about a 20-year furnace.
Yeah, well, that and it's highly inefficient.
Right.
Right. Motion by Segwit, second by Duff. Roll call, please.
Sinkwitz?
Yes.
Nedrow?
Yes.
Dumont?
Yes.
Duff?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
York?
Yes.
Next one was the lighting.
This is a great idea for Mr. Stone,
Mhm.
replacing the antiquated light fixtures that we do have, in that it exceeded the $1,500, which is our sort of threshold for purchase orders and so forth. I thought I'd bring it to the table here tonight for your approval. One other item of good news here is that we expect to get a substantial rebate from DTE post-installation here. But the idea, I think he and I both agreed that let's roll it out, not do everything all at once. Let's just see how things work. Maybe if something's too bright or something's causing somebody to have headaches or something. It could be a zillion different things. So the idea is that once phase one of this is completed, we start moving forward, replacing all of the fixtures in all of the buildings that we have, including the office and so forth.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow DPW Maintenance Supervisor Stone to purchase the 13-year fixture.
Support.
And the bulbs for the front office, right?
And the bulbs for the front office, not to exceed $1566.91.
Motion by Duff, second by Sequence. Any discussion? I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Nedrow?
Yes.
Dumont?
Yes.
Duff?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
York?
Yes.
Sinkwitz?
Yes.
Alrighty.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
before we move from that, I had talked with you about the Phragmite problem that the whole area is been fighting, and Mr. Condit gave me a nice article from a local paper, and the headline is "Invasive Plants Attack Home Values." What's been happening, I know on South Commerce Road, along that path there, a lot of that Phragmite's been knocked down, but I've been asking to get this corner cleaned up with the Phragmites. And as the trail goes up South Commerce, the Phragmites is real close to the trail. So I was hoping that something would get done while the ground was frozen. And when I asked Andy about it, it seemed to be that a chainsaw wouldn't work, our machines that cut grass wouldn't work. And I went out there and with a handsaw, I cut a swatch 4x4 in less than 2 minutes. The stuff is brittle, it's ready to come down before it starts to come up. And Councilman Duff and I, when we were up at that seminar up north last year, it was brought up by a couple people who were into this, is that if you cut it and keep it cut, it won't grow.
Yeah, it drowns it. That was their thing. I don't remember what link they were on, but they were using a weed whacker with a saw blade on it.
Saw blade.
Yeah.
Well, I know,
I think-
I know, that was the corner down here that Oakland County was gonna be treating.
Yeah, well, they treated it with
They did,
chemical.
They did treat it.
But they're done now. They're not
And-
gonna do
And that was
anymore.
supposed to have killed the base, the weeds,
Yeah.
right?
But even if some plants survive, because it's not very much, it's only about 4 or 5 feet deep, and then you get to the straggly bushes. And I figured that if they would attempt to clean this up during while the ground was frozen, we wouldn't worry about equipment getting stuck. And then as the path goes all the way up South Commerce, just like they did at South Commerce on the other side of going up towards Commerce Township, they cut that stuff back so it was more visible for people that are walking on it, that there's not anybody lurking in the trees there, because they come down and they hang over the trail. But I think it's not a difficult thing to clean up and maintain. We need to get somebody in our village to do it. And I'm hoping that.
Too bad Pat Nagy moved.
You know what?
Too bad Pat Nagy
Yeah.
moved. He would've been out
But
there
like I say,
attacking
this
them.
is not a big area, and I think it's detrimental to see it when you turn the corner and come down the village, and all that dead stuff laying there, and then that's gonna go, and it's gonna come back up, and it hangs over the bridge. That, I really think it's something that our people could handle.
I very seldom go that way, so how much of an area are we talking?
Well, you're talking an area that's probably maybe.
Andy, you want to comment?
20.
Evening, Mr. President. How are you?
Good.
Council. Well, the area that Ed's talking about, we did have correspondence with, when Nathan, previous administrator, Mr. Byrd, was leaving, he happened to be coincided with Oakland County.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some sort of a spray treatment down in that very, it'd be the northwest corner,
Yeah.
correct, of that center? And that's actually not even the most problematic area of it. Whereas I do not argue with Councilman Sinkowitz that the Phragmites, there can be a problem. Late last August, once they get to be about 12 feet tall,
Leaning over.
and they got the rain on them, and all of a sudden they bent over and they blocked half the pathway. And I had to go through there with a hedge trimmer and cut it off so people could still utilize the pathways down through from Glengarry up to towards Heron Hills. And the same situation happened at on the south end of that from Shankin to Wolverine Drive. Something should be done. The only area that I really do fairly disagree with Mr. Sinkowitz is I think it needs to be done appropriately. I think it was like nearly 10 years ago, we went behind the apartments at Wolverine Drive, and DPW spent nearly a full week trying to cut all those Phragmites out of there. And then it was the mission of the water board to be able to go through there and try and cut it down with weed whips, which wasn't very successful. I think about 2 or 3 times a year. They found out how ineffective that was, and all of a sudden the project lost a lot of steam. You can go by there today and see it's exactly the same as all the efforts that we put into that. There's zero eradication, zero.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I would like to see, and I agree with that some of these weeds need to be addressed, but I would like for them to be addressed properly and appropriately. If we're dealing with a company that already has, I don't know what kind of chemicals they're spraying on these things. I don't know their time frames of cutting. I don't know their root-bound eradications. How do you dispose of the seed tassel that's there? How do you dispose of the roots? Because if we just take them someplace else and we're replanting it into another environment, it's not really doing anything except for saying, I don't see it anymore.
I can answer that one.
Okay, please.
Phragmites are, per the State of Michigan Invasive Species Act, they have to be incinerated.
Okay,
That
and
is
the
the
last time
law.
we did that, we were pouring diesel fuel on them out here in our DPW yard and using backpacks to try to to oxygenate the fire because we couldn't get them to burn. So again, there has to be a proper way of being able to cope with this situation, sir.
What are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that we get in contact with the firm that did this? Is that what I'm
If
hearing?
they know a way of, the proper way to eradicate this weed, I would definitely go towards an environment friendly and somebody that's educated in doing what they, to eradicate this weed.
Let me ask you this,
So
Andy.
we tried also with the purple loosestrife as well, which I give you a lot of, you did a lot of work with the Walled Lake Central.
Beetles and everything.
Pretty
and trying
successful
to,
for quite a
yeah,
while.
and,
Coming back.
it helped, but
Is there any reason why the DPW can't cut that down right now? The ground is still frozen, it's dried up, I mean, it's like straw, it just breaks.
the only point
And
of
if I
that is
can-
that what are you really accomplishing? Nothing.
Well, if you cut it down,
'Cause then
and
you
then
still
as
have
you
to keep
cut the
cutting.
side of the road back 5 or 6 feet with your equipment, if you keep cutting it, it won't grow.
And we have to
But-
deal with the tassels, we have to deal with the root system. I
No,
want to do it properly.
once it's gone and you keep it cut, it won't grow.
If you know more about that, can you give me information on that?
No.
Because if my name is going to go on, anything that happens, Mr. Sinkwitz, with all due respect, even when I clean out every single storm drain around this community, I have to make a report that goes into the DEQ. When's the last time it rained? What does that material smell like? Was there any obnoxious colors? I have to have very strict written reports. When they come in here and do a checkup on us, they want to know. And I've got a book up there that says every single time I clean out a storm drain. Now, the same thing in my mind would go for this type of obnoxious
It's
invasive weed as well.
Again,
I
it's
can't
mainly
just-
the disposal of it. And again,
I want to make sure I'm doing it right. I can't say, oh, this guy says it's good to do that.
No, there's literature on it. I mean, and I'm trying to remember, it's a lake just north of us. And the DEQ actually used the research of these two individuals, basically, and they published a paper on it.
Mhm.
And it goes through the entire, the way they eradicated it, what the state said they had to do, and again, it was a step-by-step procedure. So it is out there.
I've just seen the efforts that we've put into
Sure.
that is absolutely futile.
Oh,
And
understood.
so
I mean,
I'd
that's
rather
not
go to a
the-
company that knows what they're
If you were given a
doing.
procedure, would you feel comfortable cutting it after that? If you had the information?
If I had
in a procedure?
research, I had knowledge, which I think is where we go with the PLI, sprayed something, I don't know what they sprayed.
Yeah,
Then again, we're worried about the rock salt that goes into the water, but we also have a stream right there that feeds towards the north of this community. I don't know what they're spraying, I don't know. I don't have the information on it. I'm not very comfortable.
Well,
until I have
it was my opinion,
information.
recollection that
I thought they were supposed to
have come
collect
back
it, yeah.
and they were gonna dig them out. I mean, the root
What-
system and everything, but
When I was talking to our past administrator, he said that they would put the chemical in,
right.
but they basically did not commit to cleaning it up. And I think Mike had contacted with them, and that's where we're at now.
Mhm.
Right, and we didn't pay anything for that.
Correct.
Right.
They did that gratis. They sprayed it.
Right. But my point is, this is an opportunity to get it out of there, out of sight, dispose of it, however it has to be done. If we have to take it to a landfill, or if we have to burn it, or put it in a receptacle, that can't be too hard to figure out. But get it before it starts to
Before it
grow
starts to
again.
grow.
Yeah,
I understand.
And,
That is one
and if
point
you
that it
keep
is
cutting
dormant
it,
currently.
it's just like anything else. If you keep cutting it, it won't get a chance to grow. It won't get a chance to reseed.
Well,
And it's so brittle right now, I mean, you really don't even have to cut it, you can almost break it off.
Well, I guess, I mean,
it's a
Mark,
multiple.
Yeah, I'll try to find the.
would you be able to reach out to
Yeah.
whoever it was?
I have the-
If there is processes that
There
are supposed to
is.
go through the state, then it would be prudent to know that before you start whacking things down.
That would be prudent, as I said,
I'll
I
go back through my
have no
notes
problem
again.
trying to
There was
eradicate
a
this, I agree.
whole presentation on it, and they got an award and all kinds of stuff for it.
Yeah, and I don't, because it's an invasive species,
Yeah,
it's not
there's-
like you need a permit.
No, there's no permit involved, but they do require that, just like
Proper
if you were
disposal.
to
Proper
catch a
disposal, yeah.
goby you know, that's an invasive species. Any type of invasive species, you have to destroy somehow. And plant is incineration. That I do know.
During our biannual meeting with Oakland County Administrative, Mr. Powell's involved with that as well, as they made sure that they were very specific in saying that even in our Oakland County right-of-ways, we don't want you just going out on your own personal and saying, I'm gonna spray it with whatever I want to spray it with and kill it.
I understand that.
That's why
What I'm saying
they've
is,
hired a logistic company to be able to accomplish this.
in terms of the disposal method, the state of Michigan has been very clear in terms of with animals, you're supposed to destroy them by killing them and then reporting it to the DEQ or the DNR. The invasive species in terms of plants, they're supposed to incinerate the byproduct, essentially, the tassels and the seed pods or whatever.
If I get,
Can we,
you know,
can we reach out
direction-
to the road commission to find out what the process is, or?
Just what I'm saying, it sounds like it's a two-step process here. One is find out what to do with what is
Currently there.
being requested to be taken down.
Yeah.
In parallel to that, find out who this company is and ask them what their annual or whatever their cost would be for them
Yeah,
to
'cause
come
they
in
could
and
really have
manage
a
it.
maintenance program that we could.
Yeah,
And
well,
then
that-
maybe we
mimic.
need to go to.
That was the whole thing that we found out when we went up to that seminar last year, that a lot of the people that had it, they didn't want to go in there and start pulling all the roots out,
Yeah, 'cause
breaking up the soil and causing a lot of erosion, and these were on their shoreline. They just cut it when it was, like now, it's dry, it's brittle. I mean, you can break it off. Like I said, I took a handsaw and I cut an area 4x4, and I didn't even, I was in street clothes and it took me 2 minutes. So it's easy picking. Now, I don't know what the stipulation is to get rid of it. I'm sure there's gotta be a reason, because they've cleared out a lot on South Commerce going north along that trail where the bridge is.
Let me ask a question. Our new
Yes,
administrator.
I was going to interject. Might I
Does
guess
he have any-
Andy and I can work on this and report back to you in, say, 2 weeks. We can research all the company, whatever the information that you're looking for, get the information from you. can
I'm gonna be
research on
gone
my
for a
own.
week, so I can't be any help. It's just,
Well, we
no,
have
no, but I'm just.
we know where it's
yeah.
at, so.
I'm just saying that I think this is before it starts to grow, now we're gonna be looking at soft ground, and maybe some of our equipment can't get in there and cut, but, you know, we have equipment that cleans up the shoulders. I don't see any reason why that stuff can't keep that mowed down and just never give it a chance to grow.
Mike, have you had any experience with Phragmites at all yet?
No, I've only seen it on the news, and I've seen things about it as well, living around where
Didn't know if
where
there
I
was
live in
anything
White
up in
Lake.
Clawson or not.
No, not in Clawson. No, I live in White Lake. We have that stuff. But Andy and I can reach out to each other, look at the research, talk to Councilmember Duff, and get the information. Over the next couple of weeks, I can report back to you, see where we're at with the
Now,
process.
I'm gonna leave this here. Unfortunately, I'm gonna be on the high seas, but on March 23rd in Waterford, at Waterford Oaks, there's a seminar.
There you go.
And it's on, there's Janice Gilbert, who is invasive species Phragmites control.
Perfect.
So I'll leave this here. If anybody wants to go, I've tried to get her on the phone, but I haven't been able to. But that might be some answers, but I think it's time to clean that corner up and get rid of that stuff wherever we can.
It is a Saturday.
I would actually like to make a motion that we send our new administrator and our DPW leader to that seminar.
I'd second that motion.
I agree. Yes. Gladly do it.
Cost is free, right?
Yes, it's Free Spring Invasive Species Summit.
Okay. Motion by Duff, second by Sikowitz. All in favor?
Send them away.
It's a Saturday.
The 23rd.
Mike, if you would, while you're making that investigative move, we do have these, back to what Andy was saying, I think the water board didn't give up. I think it's just a question of time. We didn't have enough time to continue to go in there and enough volunteers.
You have to keep going back.
Yeah, well, I think we did almost 15 cuts over 2 years, but I mean, after time you lose it. But could you also update yourself? We have private landowners, going back to the question of the wonderful apartments that we all enjoy driving by, and that strip going up South Commerce, as well as it touches the other private landowners, that's also all Phragmites. I think under the Invasive Species Act, there is some capability to make sure they address that issue. It's a pretty progressive, aggressive plant. It's not only seeds, it's also rosin and raw, and it's root and seed, so that's why it's so tough to control.
Yeah,
So if you don't mind that suggestion, then you can bring back that to council, so we
No,
know
s-
whose doors to knock on.
You know, something like that, it creeps in, you know, you see it, and you, I remember when it was on a lake, I never much saw it more than 4 or 5 feet high, because I'm an avid duck hunter, and I could shoot over the top of it. Now, the only thing I can shoot is so it flies over my head.
Well, that's
That
because
stuff
there is a native species.
Yeah.
There's a native species that isn't as invasive.
Yeah, and the other one is just
This
taking
one
over.
happens to come in from, I think, the Black Seas. Like,
Yep.
it was introduced with zebra mussels. We like to be a democracy.
That's the great, that's the tankers coming in from Europe.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay.
All right,
Thank you.
moving on.
Okay, great. Well, we have a game plan on that, it sounds like. Recommendations from Police Chief Ellsworth. Oh, geez, that's right. I'm sorry, glad you caught that one. We haven't been this late so far this year for a meeting.
A lot of work done.
At this point, we'll open to the second call of the public. Anybody?
There's a
Please,
familiar face.
I think, John, you know the rules. Motion to open, call. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're
John
now-
McGee, 814 Wolverine Drive. Just wanted to stop by, say hi to everybody. Wanted to thank Mike Conduct for the job he did as interim administrator over the last few months. Wanted to congratulate Michael Smith on his new job. I've been around a while, so if you're looking for background on some of these issues, other things, feel free to call on me. I'm happy to tell you what I remember, and it's less and less every day. Just all goes away. And then last item is just speaking as a homeowner, given the environmental benefits of recycling and taking that waste out of the stream over either incineration or landfill. Personally, as a homeowner, I'd be willing to pay $16 a year to continue to have that all of that recycled. We probably out of our house about twice as much recycling as actual trash these days. So it's a large amount of the waste out of this village. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Second call? Seeing none, motion to close.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. On to the police chief.
This computer modem, the 3 computer modems that I'm asking for are kind of a rush job, unfortunately. I had planned on budgeting through, as we replace the cars, to replace the modems. AT&T has decided that they're no longer going to service the towers that handle our current modems are equivalent to like a flip phone. No offense, Jerry, but and they want us to update.
Wow.
They want to. She's got a flip phone.
I know.
So, but.
Well, you really do know the residents, don't you?
I do. Our current ones are considered outdated, and they're no longer going to even service the towers that work with those. The current ones we're going to get, or the ones that I'm proposing to get, are the 5G with what we call FirstNet, which is FirstNet capable. They allow emergency services to have preference over the radio waves, clearing in case there's some national emergency. We're going to be able to actually use our computers and our cell phones rather than you guys talking back and forth to each other. Well, you're not going to jam the lines. So this is something that they've been working on for years. They're slowly improving, but now they've decided, they just found out that AT&T is no longer going to service the towers. And so it's been kind of a rush to get this information together, and I got Mr. Conduct just last week. And this obviously is not a budgeted item, so we would have to make some adjustments there as well.
So these have a certain level of high security and a different sideband than what's in your cars.
This is actually, everything is in our cars, they're encrypted, they're through Clemis, everything is done. It is very high-tech stuff that's way above my pay grade. I know I can plug them in and they work, and make our computers work. And currently, we're actually now starting to have a little trouble with one of the modems that we have. We do have one already, and that was the one we replaced last year. It's in the new Tahoe. And then we're gonna get 3 more to get this going. And it's unfortunate because it requires a specific antenna, and it's quite laborious to get this antenna installed, and that's why it costs so much for the installation. Unfortunately, that's just the way they do things right now.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we allocate the funds not to exceed $49,8750 for the purchase of the new computer modems.
Second.
Good boy. That's a motion by York, second by a bunch. Make it tough. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, actually, roll
You
call,
got roll
sorry,
call.
I caught it.
Dumont?
Yes.
Duff?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
York?
Yes.
Sinkwitz?
Yes.
Medrow?
Yes. Okay, thank you, John. Set topics for the March 27th work session, and I know we were gonna be having goal-setting session.
Did we forget or pass the?
Oh, yeah, that's
Veterans
right. I'm on M.
Memorial? I thought that was next in here.
No, that's the next one after.
Oh, it's after.
Yep. We had a goal session. We were looking at, right, goal-setting session? We've been talking about for the last couple months, so. Ed, are you gonna be here? For the 27th?
I see.
I'll be here.
2 weeks?
I should be
Okay.
here.
And I know certain people have had some topics already, and I know Malik was talking about some, so
Mhm.
everybody in the next couple of weeks could get thoughts together and talk to people and decide what we might want to have for goals going down forward. So, need a motion to set the topics?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. That was Dumont, right?
No.
No, that was
Oh,
me.
Duff, sorry. Motion by Duff, second by Scott. To have the March 27th goal-setting session. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on that. And then the last item here is Veterans Memorial Committee update. Mr. Scott.
All right. There was a separate handout that council should have had at their desk. The Veterans Memorial had their meeting on Monday, and so what you have in front of you is a series of decisions put forth in the form of motions from that committee. I think there's been great progress made, and I want to congratulate all of the members of the committee. They worked very hard at doing these things, and just to make it fairly quick and simple, we really just need to focus on some of the ideas, and I'm more than happy to give an open overview. But the first thing would be to have a motion to have Kelly Sitko come back into the fold and be added as a member of the ad hoc committee. So that's just a motion that I would like to have a support on and a vote on. Unless you want to make all of the motions combined, we can certainly do that. There are a couple pages attached to the meeting minutes here. So let's quickly say what went on going prior into the meeting. There was distribution of various photos that replicated, somewhat duplicated, but a little bit different than those that are carried in the master plan. What the committee wanted to do was to get that flag in the ground, get the pad up, approach this with a nice design that can be added to in the future, and well within the budget that is sitting inside the Park and Rec master plan and looking to make that budget almost invisible in the sense of funding by the village, other than certain base infrastructure things by fundraising activities. So a lot of discussion was had to make the first step into where that flag is going to go. And if you go in basically to the third page, you'll see what is in the master plan. That's the page with Carl Wortman's name on it. And you need a copy, Mike? No, that one?
I saw it earlier today.
That should be okay. The bottom line is a lot of discussion as to when you look just underneath the parking lot, you'll see it says proposed large picnic shelter, or an alternative would be where the Veterans Memorial should be sited. There was discussions on that parking lot issue, the pull-through of visibility when cars are parked and et cetera. An alternative discussion was also had about moving, which is the next page after, where you'll see a 1 and a 2 on it. Okay. About moving that selection of a site closer to the end of the parking lot on the Glengarry approach, if you would, for a couple reasons. I think it's fair to say that the Park and Rec side of the planning group was saying, well, if we do it behind the parking lot, wouldn't that be a better place to utilize for some kind of gathering, building, gazebo or something? Because basically where the preferred area is, and it was voted as a majority of the preferred, was to put it on 1. It's visible from the street. It will be a lit memorial, and there's some sketches in the back. And from the standpoint of the utilization of that particular property, what would you do with it that is more logical than maybe to put the memorial there, if you would? So that was the majority vote, I think by majority, if I remember correctly. There's actually a couple over there. I don't. Here, we can get mine. Well, there's some over here on the desk too. I had to make a couple extra copies. So there's extra copies. In fact, I wanted Mike to have one if possible too. So moving to item number 6, we'd be looking for a motion to approve, subject to Mike doing a review of the soils, location, and any interference that might occur in the preferred, which is item number 1, relative to easements, utilities underground, and et cetera. So that would be, if you would, the second motion for consideration. Then finally, I'll flip to what is rather crude. That's my crudeness, by the way. Rendering, and this was a rendering for discussion because I think what the committee wanted to really attack more than anything else is what is it we want to do? What is it we want to show the village within a reasonable cost, something that could be certainly expanded to if somebody wanted to come in. And I know, like, when Edward was in the meeting, he was talking about certainly putting up monuments, soldiers, and other things, and how could that be incorporated in the future into a base design that works for everybody. Other things that were considered were, and they're outlined here in terms of what we want an illustrator to go after and what these funds of $1,200 were looking to do. And that would be a large American flagpole, the possibility up to 5 armed forces flagpoles, which you'll see in that rendering, a walled pad, and if that isn't quite understandable when you look at the rendering, you're looking at a circle, and that circle would be a topped maybe 12 to 18 inches above the ground. That could be actually a sitting surface, if well designed, sitting on this raised platform on top of the elevated groundwork, which would bring it closer to the street level. As you're driving down the street, it would be parallel to it. And as far as the internal utilization of what's inside of that wall design, there was some a comment I had done just as vast scribbling to say, well, that's a great place for bricks. What do you think? We've heard that there should be some consideration of a star pattern in there or other items. And again, that's what we need to know. And we need a good illustrator to come back and do that. There was conversation of, well, should it be circular or should it be square? And I think it's fair to say the majority voted that let's go for circular. What that wall will do, that built-up wall will also allow us to put lights into the wall, electrify the wall, so that the lighting for the flags, if properly designed, can come from the inside of the monument. So as you're driving down, you'll have a monument that will feature the flags, and it should carry some light above the ground level. Now, where you go from there is a question of anywhere. But I think I have to really reach out to you on this one, Chief. Part of the flags will be a Gold Star service flag. I don't know if that's appropriate for
Actually, I was
consideration.
just, funny you should say, I was just looking that up, and I was researching this last night for a different project, and the service flag can only be displayed by an outside organization, but only if it's during any period of war or hostilities in which military service may be engaged. It's called an organization service flag. It may be displayed by the organization for the duration of such war or hostilities.
Did you get
So,
one?
So we wouldn't qualify.
we wouldn't
Okay.
necessarily qualify for that, but, yeah, I was just researching that. So
Appreciate
like I said,
that. Yeah, we weren't sure. Well, the other would be a Marine and an Army and et cetera. Part of the thinking there, I think it's fair to say, is that when you're looking to raise funds, the committee is very confident that selling bricks is a good revenue source that they can go into. We at the village are already committed to put that American flag up, but I mean, as far as those other flags, $2,200 to $2,500 for pole plus flag. You know, one would think if you reach out into the community, if you reach out into Edward, it said, for example, the Eagles Clubs and et cetera, I'm sure you can find 5 Marines who would write a check for $500. So we think the flags and the poles could be easily funded through contributions. So that gets us the bricks, the flooring. What's still up in the air is, and I know contractors, I think we all know concrete pourers, is what is the foundation gonna cost, what is the leveling gonna cost? And one of the reasons not only to raise it and bring it up, we have the garden club who would like to come in and plant flowers and bushes around, if you would, the raised ground portion. So those are the thoughts that went into it. As I said, it's been fun to be the liaison. Hats off to everybody. It was pretty intensive to go through the last 2 meetings, and here we are saying we're ready to get the shovels up. So the only thing in this motion that's money is the possibility of a $1,200 expenditure, not to exceed $1,200, which I think is high. That was my number, to get some independent designers, of which I've identified 3, and I know that Mike is aware that Carl Wortman would be able to do this, but it's a question that we're not sure where we're going with that yet. But anyways, those are the motions. If you want to pick them apart one by one, we'd be more than happy to get your support.
Question, don't they have like $12,000 sitting in a fund right now that they could use that money for?
Well, if we go back to the prior meeting, in those minutes, and it's actually somewhat covered here, I believe, Shane and his partner in the rock company, if you would, in Salona. What has gone on, and I've been in 2 of those meetings with Shane as well as Linda and other members. I think, actually, Mark, you were in the last meeting. He has come up with a design that has a cost of about $350,000 to $400,000. So that has been split out. They are moving into the Lakes Area Memorial. They are still going to be members of this committee to help us look to other funding services as well as ideas as to how to get this constructed. That particular project, going back to what I said in meetings, David Scott is, out of Commerce, is the president of the rail group that is developing.
The Airway Trail?
Yeah, the Railway Trail, and so that incorporates Walled Lake, Wixom, and of course Commerce, and it's going to run through the bridge and down into the back end of Wixom and into Milford. He was brought into the conversation because of the amount of money and where were some of the possible locations, or rails to trails. It's been discussed among that group that they'd like to look at what Shane has brought to the party. That hasn't been done yet, but that would be a possibility of a location right in Walled Lake, and there's something, well, I'm not going to say concern, I'm going to say it's a question of how the funding would be. We do know that in that group, MDOT I talked to MDOT and confirmed that the monies that have been allocated, something about $3 million plus to do the trails and the infrastructure can be not contributed to the memorial. So that's a fundraising issue. But that's the first place they're going to look at. The second place is a couple other steps down the trail. And I might say this is on the record as I'm speaking about it, but there's no decisions being made. There are 3 other locations within Commerce that were also talked about. I think it's fair to say one of those that was talked about was to be part of the new, I almost said mall, but let's call it the new town center they're building there, because within that planscape is a park. And some of the funding resources that can actually fund the park, which is private money already identified, could also do the memorial. So the long-winded answer to this whole thing is we're concentrating on what is now the Village Veterans Memorial.
Yeah, and the $1,200 that you're talking about.
But the
couldn't
12,000
come from the 12 grand.
in our.
Well,
Big
that
coffers.
is in the coffers.
Yeah.
Now, the question is,
Why
that
wouldn't
is
they
money
utilize
that
that?
is being held, but it's being held by those contributors, and now what needs to be separated is whether they were dedicating that to what was then defined as the Lakes Area Veterans Memorial or to the Wolverine Lake Memorial. So that question I'm going to put to Mike's hands.
I would say that the major contribution, which we all know was Debbie Melvin, was
Yeah.
always for the village, and hence it makes most sense to me anyway to use those funds to come up with the figure for the proposed design. I would
Well,
say.
and unfortunately, she left before she could throw her own personal contribution. There was some other
agree.
conversations about that, so I'll let you work that out with Debbie.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if everybody would take this picture and take a look at it.
We're looking at the Wortman one?
Yeah, the schematic of
Yep.
the 1 and 2.
Oh, the second one?
Yep.
I have some concerns about the 2 locations, and I'll give them to you. First of all, I favor number 2 over number 1 for a couple reasons. One,
I know, we'll let Edward go ahead.
council has to vote on it. The thing is that Glengarry is a 35, 40 mile an hour road. And I don't think that that is going to get that much attention with cars going by seeing it. The reason I like number 2, and I think I brought this out to other council members earlier, is that it goes right past our walking, bicycle, traveling trail. And anytime somebody, and it is very active in the summertime, goes by and sees it, it's there, right in front of them. And as we extend the parking lot, there's 3 or 4 trees there. if those trees have to be removed, if we put them to the left or the west of that number 2 where there's 2 now, we can almost hide the exercise equipment that's there and put it there. The rest of it, I agree with the committee, you know, we'll put it up, get it up above the ground, then raise it, put the flag, the pole, and whatever we do down the road, a council will have to make a decision on it. But what I like about this one is it still could be seen by the road, but are we interested in our residents looking at this monument? Or are more concerned about cars going by at 35, 40 miles an hour? That's my point.
Well, just as a commentary, that was Ed's presentation then. It was well discussed. One or two members felt, most of us, it's not going to be, let's say, detrimental to driving. We're not going to crank our heads so heavily. It'll be lit at night. It'll be easily observable by the police. I mean, things that we hear is monuments are a great place for crayons and spray paint to come to, so it would be, I think, easily monitored. The electrical service and, you know, this little box that's sitting on that would be not a good proportional representation of a 10-spot extension of that parking lot. So Ed's presentation, and the same thing was said, that this has to be decided by council. I would like to only reiterate that it was a majority of the vote of that committee that went for number 1. So it's up to council it's currently an ad hoc committee of council.
Yeah,
So you can go to the majority. You can do any decision you want to do. I'm just saying that after 2 years of planning, you have in front of you what this committee decided it wanted to do. And as long as it's an ad hoc committee, you overrule whatever your committee asks for.
Well, like I said, I'm just looking at where is it going to get the most attention in the village. I'm not concerned about people driving and looking at it. I'm just concerned that it's having it close to Glengarry and traffic going by it. I don't think that's as important as having the citizens going by it and looking at, walking up to it, riding up to it, and every time they go up and down the trail, they're going to see it.
Chief, I was wondering, do you have any concerns or comment on what it might do in terms of traffic patterns?
I don't see a problem with.
I don't either.
Being there as far as the traffic goes.
I think it's gonna be loud, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I see. It's gonna be very loud.
It'll be what?
Loud.
Louder.
Louder than the.
Louder.
Louder. There is,
Well,
I mean, there's no barrier
I
there.
don't think we're trying to decide on a decision of where it's gonna go tonight, are we? I mean,
Yeah, I think your committee, after spending the amount of time, is, I think there's two things at play here. I think there's a play here as to coming forward, working as an ad hoc committee, looking at all of these things you're talking about as council. It's an ad hoc committee to council. And whether or not you want to turn to that committee and say, and you have the right to do that, after all your work and your decision and thinking these things through and having this very same conversation, do you want to override their work?
Mhm.
The second thing, I think there was conversation about it might be time as an ad hoc committee to move it into a subcommittee of the Park and Recs Department, because at the end of the day, the budgeting, the decisions as to funding is really going to end up, well, if you keep it in council, it'll be in council, which has been a slow progress, but if it ends up in the Park and Rec underneath the chairmanship of Mark as a pure running subcommittee, it can be integrated to this master plan funding decisions that are going to be broached at the next meeting by Parks and Rec. as it moves through the Park and Rec Capital Expenditure Committee on a smoother track, if you would.
Do you have a motion then that you'd like to
I said that,
propose?
well, I actually said there were
Three motions here.
three motions, and I said we can take them individually if you'd like, which is now the opportune time, particularly on the second motion, which is a location. Because once we have a location, once we have illustrations, and those illustrations and the location are approved, then you have a committee of individuals who are ready to work the roads to turn out and look for those voluntary contributions.
Well, right now,
We
I
need
think,
something to
right now,
sell.
we have a motion for Kelly. to
Yeah,
be
we can sort
on-
of start one
Put
by
her
one.
on the ad hoc
Good
committee.
idea.
The second one is a motion to basically recognize both those sites, right, as possible.
No,
No?
no. It says, right, motion to council of two preferred sites for the memorial to be recognized. Well, now, these are draft minutes, but site one, the open
Yeah,
space
that's what I
detour
read.
of the Westland parking lot
That's where I
provides
was
more
confused.
visibility. Okay. There was a committee vote, and that is not in these. Let me see here. As the pedestrian handicap of the parking lot, motion changed, second Minkowski carried. Yeah, there was actually a member-to-member vote. I will turn that over to the other two members that were here. And the site in, right along Glengarry was preferred overwhelmingly.
Okay.
If I could ask Mark to come forward and have a conversation about it.
I'm not an actual member of the Vets Committee, but so I didn't have a vote. But I can tell you the vote was unanimous for Site 1 as the preferred site, Site 2 as a secondary option, should Site 1 prove to be unfeasible based on what's underneath the ground and things of that nature. So it was not there was discussion brought up about if we put it in Site 2, how visible would it be with the cars? And Site 1 does have a part of a trail running right by it, and that is also heavily used. So it's still going to get plenty of foot traffic, plus be visible from the street. And every vote that was passed in the meeting was unanimous, so
Okay,
there wasn't disagreement there.
that clarifies that. So I guess we want to take all three of these motions individually, or? Oh, go ahead, Jerry, I'm sorry.
I've been on this committee since it started. It's been 2 years. There's a ton of discussion. We went out to these areas, I can't tell you how many times. So we didn't make this decision on, oh yeah, this or that. And I'm very sorry, Edward, but from day one, we didn't want where you wanted to put it. First, you wanted to put it behind that house on the other side. We said absolutely no. So we moved it here, and now you don't want this site. Well, I'm very sorry to disagree with you, but I want all of you to know, this was not an easy decision. We worked hard, we spent a lot of hours, and we voted on it. And the only dissenting vote was Edward. So I'm asking you to please approve what we have proposed. And that's number one.
Okay, thank you. I think that clarifies that.
Well, if you recall, there was a standoff that we were gonna move
Yes.
all that
Playground
equipment too.
equipment,
Yes, and
Yeah,
that-
that's right.
And there was quite, there was another situation where there were two proposed sites, and there was a great unwillingness to compromise
Yeah,
the
that
last time around.
was adamant.
Of that, and the disregard for the fact that this is public land seemed to be something that one of the members sort of just completely disregarded.
Well, I think the whole committee's been changed, though. Some personnel's changed in it, so it's changed around. I think it has been going on a lot better road, so it's a matter of how we want to move forward with it, so.
It's up to council.
Well, let's make the first vote on putting Kelly back on.
Okay.
That's my motion, to reinstate.
Second.
Motion by second by Duff to institute Kelly back onto the board, or onto the board, I guess. And this is gonna be a ad hoc committee?
Well, it
Of
certainly is
council?
right now.
Yeah.
There isn't a motion here. There was a recommendation or a suggestion, which I'm following through on after conversation to say maybe it should move from ad hoc.
Well, let's get
to
this
become
motion
part
out of the way
yeah,
first.
Let's get this out of the way.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, on to number 2, which is a motion to,
I'll make a motion that we put it at location 2.
I would actually prefer that we just reserve both of those locations, just in case number 1 proves not to be feasible, or number 2 proves not to be feasible, Ed. Just, I mean, why not?
I mean,
I would.
Not
I
to
would,
pick one?
I would hold both of those locations. I like, whenever you have a situation like this, I would prefer having 2 locations, one as a backup. Obviously, these 2 were selected, they're considered suitable by somebody. You like number 2, I would tend to agree with you, number 2 I think is more feasible. But nevertheless, if number 2 doesn't prove to be feasible, then we have 1 to fall back on, and we don't have to have another vote on it.
and like it's been discussed, the
No.
board, or the ad hoc committee at this point favors number 1, so.
Well, and you also see the motion was to look at 2
And have
sites.
people work for 2 years and then see your vote go down the drain. Thank
Well, it
you.
hasn't gone down the drain yet, Jerry,
Thank
so.
you very much.
So
Well,
what's the motion as it sits right now?
I'm in favor of number 2 as the location.
Mark's suggesting number 1.
I would say, I would prefer having 1 and 2 as designated locations, again, for whatever reason, and then they can investigate both locations for feasibility. Mike obviously has to look into the feasibility of either location.
You're saying, maybe we're better off just to postpone it until Mike takes a look at these 2 locations?
Yeah, and again, I think that's what the vote is, essentially.
Because I know there's some concern about flooding too.
Exactly.
And that.
So if we have these 2 locations that have already been decided on as, by that committee, we're saying we're reserving these 2 locations, we've narrowed it down to these 2. Mike is going to investigate the feasibility of the ground and the flooding and all the other stuff that goes along with it. And then from there, we can make our final decision. I think that's the most prudent way of going about it.
All right, I'll retract my motion
Second his.
and I'll second his.
Okay, so it's a motion by Duff, second by Sinkowitz to have 2 locations.
Well, I think that's what
this point.
this
That's what it
basically
said.
says.
Yeah.
I just
Right.
gave
Yeah, I
you
think
what
they were looking for a definite.
They want to be number
Yeah, they
1.
wanted number
Well,
1,
we
just
said
like,
that number 1 is preferred.
just like last time they wanted the exercise equipment moved.
Yeah, the last
And they were
time,
on-
look how
This is
long.
history.
Well, I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
but
it's
look
the
how long we
same,
dragged
it's the
that,
same
that was
player,
dragged
so.
out, that committee.
Well, and we had members of council on that committee,
Correct.
and that was all vacated. There seems to be,
Well, the 2 leaders were, Jerry and Debbie were the 2 most adamant ones about removing the gym equipment.
Well, that's all in the past.
Anyway,
Let's
it's
call
all
it-
That's all
let's-
it-
Let's
it's-
take a vote on
it's
this.
all in the
let's
past.
take a vote
Carry a
on
vote.
this. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries on that one. I guess we got the 3rd motion, right? Which is to engage Carlisle Wortman,
Well,
or any,
yeah, I think we can actually have
Three?
the initial renderings from 2 sources done free. But Carlisle Wardman is in fact, if Mike wants to, I think there's some ability to, is there a credit there or something, Mike? I don't know what.
How so? I'm sorry.
But do
Well,
we even need to make a motion on this? I thought we agreed that there was funds that the money could come out of.
And that's where it should come out of, for several
Yeah.
reasons.
Right.
Number 1 would be, I've got to track this stuff. And if it's something unbudgeted, if we put it someplace else, we can always refund that at some point in the future if the village feels that that's an expense that was unfairly borne
you can
somehow
talk to
by
Debbie
the
to see if that
people
would be
who
okay.
donated
I
it. By the
think,
way,
yeah, I have no problem
Okay.
you allocating it. I'm just saying that the council should be aware that part of the conversations that were going on based upon moving the lakes area, major monument, into a different location, and the veterans was to check back with the contributors, because there was some concern that there could be confusion in the field as to where this money was gonna go and what type of monument was gonna be built.
I believe 10,000 of it was directly from her, right?
Correct. Right.
So, I mean.
Well, she's the one that's raising the question mark, I'm not, so.
In various other, I'll have to look by date, but I think
Right.
most of the contributions we had, if not all of them, were prior to any discussion about the monument being moved to a location in Walled Lake.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
So do we even need a motion?
I don't think so.
I didn't think so, not to spend the money on that thing. All right. So I guess
Excellent.
Are we, now, was there some discussion that you were talking about having a subcommittee for Parks and Rec?
Well, it wasn't a subcommittee, it was a question of whether or not it would be more efficient in terms of the overall continued communication to move this from an ad hoc committee of council, since it is part of the master plan, and bring it underneath the Park and Recreation group as a full subcommittee, so that they can work directly with the Park and Rec board, which tends to be how they're working anyways, and then move forward that way. So that when these recommendations come up, they come up directly to Park and Rec, and it's a combined vision that's gonna be pulled together as the Park and Rec master plan indicates it will be. And that is all, in essence, easily worked in one committee section, section, which would be the Park and Rec Capital Committee. That was the only reason for this.
So the board members are amenable to that then?
I think for the most part, unfortunately, they've all left.
Well, why don't we bring it up to them and make sure we're doing what they
That's
want.
fine.
Well, it was discussed there, but we didn't
Okay.
make a motion. It was more
We
conversation.
can
So
decide
that's
on that
fine.
next month, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Good enough. That ends that one. Pending business, I don't think we have anything else to pend. Update from Chief Ellsworth.
Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
Yes, it is.
Administrator, interim administrator Condick.
Just one last reminder about that the Lakes Chamber of Commerce luncheon, March 26th, roughly 11:30 to 1:30. All of the supervisors and/or Brian, for example, as village president, will be making presentations to the assembled audience. It is at Edgewood. Food's good. Just let me know, because we get a discounted price. It's on the village if I sign you up by March 22nd. So far, I've heard from Ed, he's in. If any of you want to get back in, or get into it, I should say, let me know before that point. That's all I got.
And our new administrator.
Yes, yes. Thank you again for your confidence in me, your vote of confidence. I did start Monday. I've had a wonderful time so far meeting with Mike, with John, quite a while. With council, I had a great meeting with you before I started with Brian and John. And I had a great tour of the village from Mr. Sinkowitz this morning. I think for some of the other people, I did speak to Nathan for, goodness, it was almost 2 hours, kind of giving some feedback. So I reached out to Nathan to get some background on things. So I'll definitely reach out to John. And I've met with Andy a couple times already. So trying to get to know everyone over the next month, so 2, 3, whatever. I look forward to the goal session, working together to see where we're at together and move forward with this. And I'm happy to be here. It's my hometown, I guess you can say. I live in White Lake, but as you can see, my kids are very happy that I'm 10 to 15 minutes away rather than an hour. So
There you go.
it was very nice to come back to this area and really get to know, as I'm seeing Clara Miller and all this stuff, bringing back memories when I was little, playing on the parks and all those kind of things, seeing the tour today. So it was wonderful it's wonderful to be a part of this community now.
Great, welcome again.
Thank you.
Okay, council comments, stuff.
Nothing.
Got nothing.
Yeah, nothing, huh?
Yeah, I'll say welcome as well.
Welcome, yeah. Thank you. Say that.
John?
Well, as liaison to the Lakes Area Youth and voted on the board today, I just want to put a date way out there, which is October 1st, which is Taste of the Lakes. right in the middle of planning. There's also a meeting, I think it's an open, it is an open meeting, it is a panel discussion, it includes a member of the state, I don't want to say penitentiary, correctional facilities, and a panel of police officers and school counselors and also officers as to the importance of Layla in the Walled Lake Community School System. So I'll give you that date. I think it's April 22nd, but it'll be firm at our next council meeting.
Nothing.
Nothing from Walt? Ed?
I welcomed him on the first day here in the morning, and then we went for a little 25-cent tour around the lake. One thing I wanted to bring up, at the beginning of the winter season, if we recall, I made the suggestion about getting those orange stakes and using them, and they were gone like within
2 days?
2 days.
Not even that?
Well,
2
I
hours.
drove around the community and just kind of looking a little bit. They seem to be very beneficial. I think it made it, I'm assuming it would make it easier for the DPW to know exactly where everything is, and there was a lot less lawn damage, but I think we should be prepared next year and have more of them available for the residents. Other than that,
Okay.
everybody be careful on St. Patty's Day.
One thing for me is, we've got a upcoming training session packet from Oakland County Planning Group. And there's a lot of information as far as different training sessions that are available through the county. And there is always through Michigan Association of Planning and through Michigan Municipal, I think, also. But I think it's important to stress, like, we really need to entice our board members to, I know Water Board's gone through a whole bunch of, a bunch of people have gone through the.
Well, they're in
you
the
know,
process. It's a 40 to 60-hour course.
Right.
From Michigan State
Pretty
University.
extensive course through Michigan State. And I think it's important that we make available, we always have made available, but we haven't really stressed enough to get people on, new people on planning or new people on ZBA to really get into those courses. It teaches you a lot about what their job is, and I can't stress enough, so maybe we can pass these on to the boards and commission chairs and just try to stress that, it's paid for by the village, and I think it's very useful training, so it would be, I think it'd be nice to even have something, like maybe once a year, once every couple of years to update training, so that's the one thing I had, I guess, for soapbox. Other than that.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Segwitz.
Motion to adjourn?
Second by Duff. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Welcome again, Michael.
My longest meeting.